I grew up in a small town in central Arkansas. Every deer season around November, my family and I would go to our hunting cabin near Mena, Arkansas. My great-grandpa built the cabin in 1984. It was a nice cabin for the time. It's slightly outdated now, but it worked fine for my family and friends and I. 2 years ago, my friends Austin and Cody went with me to the cabin in late October for a pre-season hunt called muzzleload hunting. We were scouting an area about a mile from the cabin looking for any signs of deer because we were considering putting a stand near the spot. After splitting up and wandering around trying to find an area with the best lines of sight for a stand, I came across a pile of rocks in the woods. After closer inspection, I realized it was a grave belonging to a man named Ed Crane. We were not bothered, more interested than anything. We snapped a couple pics, and after finding a decent spot for a stand, we headed back to the cabin. Cody tried doing some research to find anything out about Ed Crane, but he didn't come up with a whole lot. Fast forward 3 weeks, we're back at the cabin for the official modern gun season. This time it's just Austin and I. We were sitting in the cabin discussing where we should go for opening day, and I decided I would try out the stand we had previously put up during muzzleloading season. Austin went about 1.5 miles the other direction towards a small lake off the property to hunt. I left the cabin around 4:45 a.m. because I had about 1.5 miles walk and wanted plenty of time to walk slow and get to the stand before daylight. This isn't a national forest and you cannot drive any vehicles into the hunting trails. We split up at the end of the road, me going left towards the stand and Austin going the opposite direction. It was a normal walk for the most part. I've been in these woods since I was 9 years old, and a mile walk was nothing out of the ordinary. I finished my walk and approached the stand, trying to be quiet as to not scare any deer that are bedding in the area. As the sun slowly started to rise, I couldn't help but keep looking over to my right to see the grave we had previously found. It was around 30 yards from where I was sitting, and it was thinly buried in surrounding brush. There was just enough light to make out the mound of rocks through the leaves. I saw something move out of the left side corner of my vision. This was not frightening at all. I'm completely used to seeing movement early in the morning while hunting. If anything, this was exciting. I turned fully to the left, but I could not locate what I was looking at. There was no movement. About that time, I heard, "Hey," in an almost whisper scream coming from behind me. This made me physically jump so hard that I shook the stand. I flung my head around backwards, but there was nothing there that I could make out. After turning on my headlamp and panning my surrounding area for at least 5 to 6 minutes, I took out my hand radio. While shaking, I radioed to Austin asking if he was near me. I got no response. I continued calling in on the radio, while looking back and forth for the next 20 minutes. Daylight was approaching, and after chalking it up to being in my head, I finally started to calm down. The sun rose up over the trees, burning off the thin layer of fog that was covering the woods. This is around 7 a.m. now. I had almost forgotten about the incident when I heard it again. This time, "Hey Caleb." It was in the same whisper-type scream as before. This time it was enough. I grabbed my bag and gun so fast. I accidentally left the hand radio on the seat beside me in the stand. I climbed down the ladder so fast I almost slipped off. I hit the ground and speed walked all the way back to the cabin, peering over my back every 10 to 20 steps. I opened the cabin door, and Austin was nowhere to be seen. He was still hunting. When Austin finally did return to the cabin, he was confused. He kept asking if that was me screaming into the radio. I explained to him my experience, and I explained I never screamed. His radio was clipped to his belt while he was standing in the doorway trying to make sense of what had happened, and right as we were talking about it, his radio started making this incoherent screeching sound. Not a static sound. It sounded organic, like some kind of animal was making it. We listened intently and sat the radio right beside us for the rest of the day. It never happened again. We came back later that week with our other friend Cody, and I looked for my radio in the stand and on the ground around it. It was nowhere to be found. Needless to say, we no longer hunt in that spot. We don't even hunt anywhere in that direction past the gate. It was the weirdest, most unexplainable experience of my life. It was a cold December night. I was hanging out with a few friends, Todd and Tristan. We were bored and had nothing to do. So one of us came up with the idea of going to the nearby train station platform to take some pictures and goof off. The platform isn't far from our houses. When we got there, we started taking pictures of the liminal space we found ourselves in. After hanging out there for a little while, it started getting even colder and we were hungry. So we started to head to our car. The path back takes us on a long footbridge across a canal. We spent some time on the bridge joking around and taking more pictures. The mood could not have been better, but the cold was getting to us, so we started back on our way again. The bridge was not wide enough for the three of us to walk side to side. I was walking in front, Todd and Tristan behind me. We were joking and chatting as we walked. Tristan said something funny, and I turned, still walking and laughing at what he said, when I noticed a man walking just feet behind Tristan. He looked to be in his late 30s. His face was dirty and he was wearing a black and white plaid shirt and ball cap. His arms were down at his sides. In one hand was a cigarette, and in the other was a large kitchen knife, clear as day. My blood ran cold when I saw it. I quickly spun back around, pretending I hadn't seen him. For some reason I thought that was the best thing to do. My fight or flight kicked in, and I found myself speed walking to the end of the bridge. I hoped that my friends would catch on and match my pace. I glanced back at them to check, and thankfully they were right on my tail. But the man was too. He was now so close that an outsider would have thought he was part of our group. He stepped off the bridge and took a path going to the right, my friends still having no idea the man was even back there. Fearing I was about to need to defend myself, I held my tripod up like an axe. The man seemed to get the memo and took the path to the left. We walked a little bit further before I pointed him out to Todd, and I gave him a quick rundown of the situation we almost found ourselves in. Walking backwards, we watched the man disappear into the darkness, and we hurried back to the car. We drove to the nearest gas station where we got food and talked it over. The whole situation was just a weird story, up until a few days ago when I was checking the pictures I had taken that night. This picture shows Todd under a light on the station platform, but just beyond the light, almost behind a freight car, is the silhouette of the man. The picture was taken at least 30 minutes before the situation on the bridge, meaning he was watching us, waiting for us to put the cameras down and turn our backs. You hear stories of things like this happening, but you never expect it to happen to you. I still get chills thinking about how differently it could have gone. My husband was in the military, and after we got married, we bought a house in a small town in North Carolina. Despite being considered a military town, it really was not a safe area to be in. One night we even heard gunshots down the street from us. But anyway, because of his job, he was gone for training operations often, and he also worked nights when he wasn't having to travel. This meant I was home alone most of the time. At the time of this story, I was in college full-time, so I was able to fill my days with lots of studying and homework to pass the time he wasn't home. One night when I was writing an essay, I was laying in bed with our dog Simba, and we both heard what sounded like rustling coming from above our heads. Simba started barking and growling, which is unusual for him. He's a pit bull mix, and despite people thinking they're scary dogs, he is a huge baby and had never acted like this before. I thought it was mice, so I texted my husband and he agreed. He told me he'd call pest control the following day so I wouldn't have to worry about laying bait and traps myself. 2 days later, pest control came and did what I thought was a thorough inspection of the house. There was some evidence of mice and roaches in the attic, so he laid some baits and also sealed some entry points in our home. However, over the next week, the rustling kept getting worse and worse, and was always at nighttime. And every time I would hear it, Simba would freak out, and at one point his hair was literally standing up on his back. This started to really freak me out, so when I called my husband after this happened, he assured me that it was the mice and they were just freaking Simba out. Later that night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I thought I heard footsteps from above. But since my dog didn't hear it, I thought I was just psyching myself out. Being home alone so often, I did have some anxiety, especially at nighttime, because I didn't feel safe without my husband home. The next day I slept in pretty late and had woken up with a fever, so I wasn't feeling great. I got up to let Simba outside. The layout of the house was odd. You had to go into the garage to open the backyard door, and the entrance to the attic was right above it. As I was walking to the door, I felt like I was going to vomit. Not because I was sick, but because the door had a huge dirty handprint on it and a bunch of smudges from the inside. Someone had been in there. I assumed someone had broken in through the garage in the middle of the night, so I took a picture of the door and called the police. I texted my husband to tell him what was going on while I waited for the police, but unfortunately he couldn't respond until later due to work. The police came in just a few minutes since their station was right down the street. I showed them the handprints and how I couldn't understand how someone broke in because I would have heard the garage door opening. Then I realized that maybe the rustling I was hearing wasn't mice, and that the footstep I heard was actually a person. I told this to the police, and they immediately checked the attic. It turned out, some guy who lived with his family down the street from us was a meth addict, and he had been avoiding staying at his family's house, and so he had snuck into our garage when I was gone one day and had been living up there for a little over a week. Somehow pest control had missed him because he was hiding behind a bunch of boxes. Apparently the inspector was not as thorough as I had hoped. Our Ring security system never even picked the guy up on camera entering our home, so he must have entered another way. Thankfully, we no longer live in that house or area, and despite this happening a few years ago, I still get scared being home alone at night for any amount of time. I'm just thankful nobody got hurt. The year was 2006. I had moved into a house with my college friend Steven and his friend Heather. I worked overnight at a radio station a few times a week. To keep my body regulated, I kept the same schedule on my nights off, which means I was up all night with way too much time on my hands. Something I liked to do super late or past midnight was to stroll through a graveyard near my house. I usually brought a camera and a tape recorder to see if I could catch anything strange. I did this a few times and did capture a few photos that showed activity, including a strange mass of color near a bench. One night driving back home, I listened to the playback of the cassette tape in my car of what I had just recorded. On the tape, I had asked if there was anyone here with us, even though I was the only one there. A weird, exhausted voice replied with a simple no, as if to say we were the only ones there. When I heard this, I had just about driven off the road. I had chills and became terrified. I know this was the point of what I was trying to do, but I guess I didn't know how to react if I had actually caught something. When I came home, I woke up my roommate to seek some comfort. He was less than empathetic and told me not to bring that crap in the house. Shortly after this incident, things got weird. One night in my room, I was watching videos on my computer when the decorative leaves I had on the wall started swinging back and forth as if they had just been smacked by something. Another night, I had come home after purchasing some things at the store. I was in my room, and I had left a plastic bag from the store on the floor. As I was lying in bed, the bag started making a crackling sound like crumpling a bag with your hands. I looked at the bag. It was just sitting there. It kept making the sound, and soon enough started moving and hopping across the floor all by itself. I jumped up, stood on my bed, and called my roommate on the phone who was upstairs. I told him to come downstairs to my room ASAP. As soon as I got off the phone, the bag immediately stopped moving and making noises. My roommate thought I was crazy when I told him what happened. He took the bag outside and checked for what he thought might have been a mouse or something in the bag, but no such thing was found. I also had one of my worst recurring nightmares in that room. I've had a recurring nightmare since I was a kid, where I feel like my eyes are being forced shut into sleep. It happens after I wake up or before I fall asleep. My teeth always start chattering and I can barely make any audible speech to tell it to go away. I have never known what this was. The times this has happened to me, a few unpleasant things have come along with it. One time I felt hands grabbing at me. Another time I saw a horrifying face in the closet. One night in the room I began drifting off into sleep early, and in between being awake and being asleep, this thing started up again. It was very weak at first and I taunted it, saying, "Is that the best you can do?" But it became powerful and hard to fight. It felt like 30 full seconds of not being able to get out of this powerful force. I couldn't move and I felt like my body was being spun around, even though it wasn't. Finally, it stopped. I don't know if this is some sort of sleep paralysis or if what was happening in the room had anything to do with it. Early one morning at 5 a.m., what sounded like huge footsteps walking through somewhere in our place shook the whole house. Everyone was asleep except for me, of course lying in bed. It couldn't have been Steven upstairs, he was never this loud. We lived near a military base, so maybe it was from that, but the way the loud booming stomps moved in succession was like some giant person walking through. All these things were confusing and mysterious, But it wasn't until one night when I snapped a picture of the three of us in the living room that my roommate and I knew that we had a presence in the house. We were having a party. What you're looking at is me taking a picture of us in the living room with our giant mirror on the wall. I was holding my camera as still as I could, yet there seems to be activity all around us. I have no idea what those weird strings of lights are to the right of the lamp. We have nothing that would give off any kind of light like that in the house. To the right of that, there seems to be a strange mass of light imitating a figure, but the weirdest of all is the rising mass of yellow light coming between Steven and I, which looks to have eyes, a face, and a sinister smile atop a body. Maybe that yellow was a reflection from our kitchen light, but there's a lot of it. I've also tried retaking the same picture, and those yellow lights don't come up anymore. I don't know if something from the cemetery had followed me home or if there was already a presence before we moved in, but what I told you was the worst of it. And about 10 months later, we moved out of that house, not telling any future tenant or renter about it. A friend of mine, who I'll call John, was 27 at the time, and his former buddy, who I'll call Rich, was around the same age. Rich was a very daring man, if you will. John at the time was struggling with life decisions and had very little friends. Rich and John belong to a hobby group of people who are interested in fire alarms, exit signs, and other life safety equipment. Kind of an unusual hobby, but they're out there. Rich had a problem with going into abandoned buildings and stealing these devices and often bringing them home, adding them to his collection or otherwise selling them on eBay. While John didn't think it was right, he was desperate for a friend and went along with him on his adventure. But this adventure very well became a nightmare for John. On November 18th, 2019, they settled off for a trip to Gary, Indiana. And if you don't know Gary, it's not the safest place on the planet, to say the least. The trip would entail staying at a hotel in the nearby town of Hammond and heading into several abandoned schools so Rich could basically steal old and oftentimes rare life safety equipment. It was going well for them until November 20th. This day at approximately 7 at night, John and Rich went to the abandoned Horace S. Norton Elementary School at 1356 Harrison Boulevard. They started making their way through the first floor. The doors were wide open, and I mean wide open. The building smelled like sewage, skunk, and shit all mixed together. They made their way to the north end wing of the building, and John watched Rich rip down several old exit signs. Again, John and I are against that, but John was desperate for a friend. As they made their way down to the south side of the building, they entered the cafeteria. It was pitch black except for the beam of their flashlights. And there was some graffiti, desks, and books scattered. You know, the typical abandoned building scenes. John was taking pictures throughout. After the cafeteria, they made their way to the gym. Little did John know his life was about to change forever. John noticed a trail of blood with his flashlight, and out of curiosity decided to follow it, and what it led to was quite disturbing. A 27-year-old female laid there dead in a pool of blood. It was gruesome as hell. Her arms were up, with her hands in the shape of a dinosaur, as John put it. Just the way John described the scene to me made me lose sleep for a couple nights. John screamed and ran into Rich, and Rich whispered, "Shh, they may hear us." John was shaken up and showed Rich the body, to which he said, "Just don't say anything to anybody and we'll pretend this never happened." They left immediately, but obviously shaking. As soon as they got back to the hotel, John called the police. Sure enough, the woman had been missing for 2 days prior. It didn't take long for the police to track down a text conversation between the woman, who was now identified as 27-year-old Adriana Saucedo, and her murderer. She was planning to buy some weed and an iPhone apparently, and the suspects had intended to rob her. The robbery went wrong, and they ended up killing her. Not before dragging her body into the gym of the elementary school and casually dumping it there just a day before John and Rich went there. Sure enough, it didn't take long for the police to track down the teen murderer and put him in custody. The teen also turned in 2 others as well. All of these kids were charged as adults, and the story is on the news as well. John is no longer friends with Rich, for obvious reasons, and this event still haunts John and I to this day. I was looking for a car to buy for my son for his 18th birthday. I was searching all the typical car websites, cars.com, eBay Motors. They were all overpriced as expected. Craigslist was the only place to find an actual deal. About a week into my search, I found an '03 Toyota Camry. It had 67,000 miles, no accidents, no damage, and good condition for only $3,500. This seemed like a steal for such a reliable car with such low mileage. The seller lived about 10 miles from me, which was a reasonable drive when looking for a car. I gave him a call to set up a time to come check it out. The man sounded normal on the phone. He assured me there were absolutely no problems with the car. He introduced himself as Bob. I brought along $3,500 in cash, even though I planned on wiggling down the price as much as possible. I pulled up the dirt road to Bob's property about 15 minutes early. It was a tiny little house with a decent-sized property, only because it was a bit far from the nearest neighbors. The garage was open, so I looked over to see if anyone was inside, but except for an unusual amount of car parts, it was empty. The car was nowhere in sight. The only car on the property was an old pickup truck. I went over to the front door to check the house numbers. It was the right address. The doorbell button was missing, so I knocked on the front door. I knocked every once in a while for exactly 5 minutes before deciding to give the man a call. So I dialed his number, and I heard the sound of his phone ringing from inside the house. I was extremely confused at this point. Now I knew I had the right house. I didn't understand why, if he was home, why he wasn't answering. I decided I had to take a peek through one of the windows to see if anyone was inside. Peering through the glass, I couldn't really see much as it was pretty dark inside the house. I saw a very old-fashioned dining room set, but across from that, I saw somebody standing at the back door of the house, staring outside. I figured that must have been Bob, so I knocked on the window, but he didn't even move. There was no gate or anything to the backyard. It was just a wide open yard since this wasn't a rural area. I simply walked around the house to the backyard. I didn't understand how he couldn't hear me. When I got to the back door, I made a shocking realization. The figure standing by the door was a taxidermied human being. I ran straight back the way I came and back to my car. I looked up one last time before driving off. The blinds to the window I had peeked into had been shut, but I could see 2 of the blinds creased open. Somebody was at that window, watching me. You could probably guess I had the gas pedal to the floor the whole way home. The whole situation still makes no sense. All the car parts, the fact that there was no Toyota Camry, the taxidermied human being. Given that there was no car there, leads me to believe that whoever that man was wasn't planning on selling me anything. And that also leads me to the disturbing thought that I was very close to becoming a lifeless statue staring out that man's back door. This happened when I was really little and often left alone with my single mom. She always came to check on me every night when she would get up to go to the bathroom. This one night in particular, I remember waking up thinking I heard something in my closet. I looked up and my mom was at the foot of my bed giving me a playful wave. She told me to go back to sleep. She then went into my closet and pulled the door until it was just barely open, and she just stood in there, poking her head through the crack of the barely open closet. I remember vividly seeing her eye peeking through the crack at me. I laughed like any little kid would do in that situation, and then fell asleep moments later. When I was eating cereal the next morning, I asked my mom why she was hiding in my closet last night, and she just stopped and gave me a puzzled and concerned look. She told me she hadn't been in the room all night. At first she assumed somebody had broken into the house, but she soon realized it was some kind of hallucination or dream. Since this experience, I've only had 2 other hallucinations, neither of them as vivid or as creepy as this one. In the year 2009, I was spending a weekend with my uncle on his ranch when my parents were renovating the new house we had just bought. It was my second night there, a Saturday, and it happened to be during one of the biggest thunderstorms of the year. I'd say there were at least 3 crashes of thunder and lightning per minute.
And we were in the heart of the storm because the thunder would crash not even a second after the lightning would. I always enjoyed listening to storms while laying in bed, so I stayed up a little later watching TV, just enjoying the ambiance. After the movie I was watching finally ended, I turned off the TV and tried to fall asleep. As I heard the lightning strike from outside, I could have sworn I heard some kind of metallic thud coming from outside at the same time. I didn't pay it too much mind. 20 seconds later, I could have sworn I heard it again. A very distinct metallic thud coming from outside to match the timing of the lightning. I really don't mean to make this sound like a cliche horror story, but my uncle really is a kind of creepy guy, and I was never close with him even remotely. So for that reason, I didn't feel right going to wake him up. I just tried to forget about it. Now I was getting concerned. What the hell could that be? After the third time, I finally got out of bed and walked over to the window of the guest bedroom. The water pouring down on the window made it extra hard to see what was out there in the dark fields. A flash of lightning momentarily lit up the property, but I couldn't see anything. However, once again, the sound of a metal hit accompanied it. The sound was so close now, it sounded like it was coming from the left of the window at a blind spot. I was going to do something I knew my uncle wouldn't be happy about. It would be a bit messy, but I was going to open the window and peer outside to see if I could see what the sound was. I unhooked the window lock and slid it up, and immediately the wind of the storm blew drops of rain into the room and onto me. I stuck my head out the window and looked to the left, and at that very moment, lightning lit up the property once again, and I could see a person dressed in all black crouched down by the outside basement door with his hand raised in the air. And before the sky went dark, I caught the briefest glimpse of what the sound was coming from. The person was bashing at the basement door lock. I pulled my head in and quietly shut the window, making sure to lock it. I was in a panic. I feared he might have seen or heard me. I ran back to bed and pretended to be asleep, facing away from the window. Lightning crashed once again, but this time there was no metallic thud. My heart must have dropped as I realized this. I just stayed put in bed for the longest time, hoping whoever was out there would go away. After maybe 3 more lightning crashes without any thuds accompanying them, I thought it would be safe to go tell my uncle. I turned to face the window and screamed. There was a figure, clear as day, standing at the window, looking in at me. I screamed as loud as I could and ran straight to my uncle's room. He went outside with his hunting rifle with nothing on but his pajamas, not even socks. He ran around the entire property yelling like a madman, but didn't find anyone. The next morning, we were able to better see the marks on the basement door lock. It was almost bashed open. Maybe 3 or 4 more good hits would have done it, according to my uncle. He was proud of me for picking up on it. Luckily, I was out of there that same day. My uncle hasn't told us of any incidents since, so I think he's been okay. Not that we talked to him much at all. I'm grateful I stayed up a little later that night watching that movie, because I may have just stopped a robbery, or possibly much worse.
I don't care if anyone judges me, but I like to go to the movie theaters alone. My work schedule's all over the place. I often don't work weeknights. So on a stormy Wednesday night, a night not many other people would be thinking to go drive to a movie theater, I did just that. I always like avoiding crowds in anything I do. That's just how I am. It was 2017. I went to see some low-key movie that probably wasn't at the top of most people's must-see movie lists. I was the only one in the theater, just like I expected. I sat myself right in the center seat of one of the higher-up rows and put my feet up on the seat in front of me. About 20 minutes into the movie, I'd say, I noticed someone a few aisles down. I didn't notice them coming in. The theater was dark because the scene in the movie at the time was in a dark room. They weren't sitting in a seat like a normal person, though. All I saw of them was the top half of their head, peering over one of the seats to be looking in a direction that definitely was not the screen. It was still too dark to be able to tell if they were looking directly at me or not, but when the scene changed to a brighter background, the whole theater got brighter.
bright enough to see they were looking basically at me. But their face was so pale and lifeless looking, and their hair messy and wiry looking. I couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. I'm an introvert, or just an awkward person, so I didn't really want to ask if there was something wrong. I viewed that as confrontation. The screen went darker again, and at the same time, the person lowered down behind the chair completely until I couldn't see them anymore. They were completely hidden from my view. I couldn't concentrate on the movie now, though. I was actually very uncomfortable. Actually quite terrified. I didn't get up, though. I stayed put in my seat. Many scenes in the movie passed. I almost forgot about what happened. Almost. Just when I was getting back into the movie, the person's head appeared from behind a seat again. This time much closer, only like 3 rows of seats away from me. I actually let out a holy shit and a loud yell because it genuinely made me jump. Now I was able to see more detail or features in their face. They actually looked lifeless. Their eyes motionless, hung open. But still, I somehow couldn't tell if they were looking directly at me or not. Now I could better see it was a man with long, unkempt hair. I noped the F out of my seat and down the road to the exit. I had to pass the row in which the person was in to get to the exit door. As I passed the row, I looked down it, and while I expected to see the rest of the person's body sitting hunched behind the seats, instead what I saw was something you'd see in a nightmare. There was some guy basically laying on the floor, holding up a severed head perched on a stick. I didn't stick around to see if it was some sick joke or if the head was real or not. I ran for it through the exit door, and I ran out of the back exit of the building to the parking lot. I drove home in a panic, heart racing. That head looked so real. I got home and did some research about possible recent murders or missing people in the area, and I found something. After browsing a list of missing people in the area, I found the picture of a 17-year-old boy named Donald Watkins who had gone missing a month prior, and based on the picture I found, his face could have matched the head I saw in that theater. Of course, that could be my brain trying to connect any similarities, but the hair, the nose, the eyes, they looked like they could actually be a match. The next day, I simply made a call to the theater and told them the story and suggested they check their cameras and see if anything strange came up. I gave them my number to reach me if they needed to, but I never heard from them. I chose to not spend any more of my time on it. A long time ago, I very briefly lived with my good friend Ben on a quiet street in Northville, Michigan, perhaps notable for being close to Detroit. It wasn't the nicest house, or block, or area for that matter, but the price was unbeatable for 2 broke young men like ourselves. Ben and I went way back to when we were like 9 years old, and at the time of this story, we worked the same job, and rooming together with him seemed like a great idea. On our first day there, we quickly figured out that the creepy-looking house across the street with the overgrown grass and bushes was abandoned, as were a lot of the houses around the area. In fact, something we somehow hadn't noticed before, there was even graffiti next to one of the front windows and on the fence. Our neighbors on one side seemed like creeps, and we didn't even want to approach them. The neighbor on the other side was an older dude, a very interesting hippie-ish kind of guy. His name was Marv. He had long gray hair with a matching long gray beard. He seemed friendly at first, I guess, but also very weird and hard to talk to. We spoke with him on our second day there after work. He told us the place had been abandoned for as long as he could remember. That night, with the sun almost set, while we were sitting on the front stoop smoking, I looked to the house across the street and felt a little tingle in my stomach out of shock. I stood up, threw my cigarette onto the floor and crushed it. Ben looked at me confused, and I pointed to the window across the street. I was pointing at a face, which I saw staring at me through the lone upstairs window of the house. "Do you see that? There's someone at that window." Ben looked at the window immediately, but I saw the person move their head away before he could see it. It's weird. I explained to Ben that I didn't even know if it was a male or female, old or young. The glass was just too foggy. All I knew was that I saw the eyes, and they were staring at us. Ben told me I was legitimately creeping him out. He believed me. We ran over to Marv's house to tell him, but strangely he didn't answer his door, even though we saw him watching TV in his tiny, messy living room through the window. The fact that the guy wouldn't answer creeped us out even more. Dude, what the fuck is going on with this place? Ben laughed, but the situation couldn't stay comical for long. Ben owns a katana. He brought it to mention and suggested we go across the street with it, break into the house from the backyard, and see what was going on. We were always adventurous, daring troublemakers as kids, so this was our natural response to the situation. When it got dark, we went across the street to the backyard, broke off the board holding the back door shut, and entered the house. We both had heavy-duty flashlights with us to light up basically any room we were in. The house was dusty, decrepit, but surprisingly seemed to remain untouched from the inside. No graffiti or signs of vandalism anywhere. Still, the place was disturbingly creepy, and we immediately joked that we should get the fuck out of there. But we pressed on. The first floor was pathetically small like our own. A kitchen, a tiny living room, and a dining room. There was no basement and one closet. The first floor was clear. We both agreed to check the upstairs. We tiptoed over to the stairs, and Ben, out of nowhere, screamed, "Is anybody up there?" "Dude, why the fuck would you do that?" I said quietly. Then we both froze in fear when we heard rapid stomping suddenly appear from above us. It was someone heavy, and it sounded like they were running over to the stairway. I literally felt like my heart stopped. Ben, the one with the katana, was the first to flee, grabbing my arm and tugging me with him. We went out the way we entered and ran back to the house, where we saw Marv just standing by his window, watching us. We didn't know what to do. He just intently stared at us as we froze to catch our breath in front of the house. We went inside, decided not to call the police, and moved out literally the next day. We explained to the landlord that the location was just too inconvenient for us, and we needed to leave ASAP. We drove away from that house and never looked back.
For my son's 12th birthday, my wife and I threw him a little party in the backyard. We invited the whole family, as we usually did for any of our kids' birthdays, and let him invite all of his friends too. We live in rural New Jersey, so our backyard connects to forest on two sides. We also have a pretty big property, which allowed us to space out a bunch of tables on the grass with food and refreshments. The little party went into the night. Most of our guests left, but closer family and some of our friends stayed late. It was probably 8 o'clock. The mosquitoes were out in full force, so I decided to run over to the shed at the far end of the backyard by the woods to fetch the tiki torches. I grabbed like 6 torches and set them on the grass while I went back in to look for fuel. However, while I was in the shed, I heard steps in the woods. I stopped what I was doing to take a look out there, but honestly it was just too dark to see out into the woods. After finding the fuel, I went back to the part of the yard everyone else was at and pitched the torches into the ground. The 6 torches gave off a decent amount of light while keeping us safe from the blood-sucking pests. There were about 6 kids left, including my son, and they all wanted to play hide-and-seek in the woods. My wife and I allowed it, just making sure to tell them to stay close to the tree line. My son and his friends went to play their little game in the woods, which left the rest of us to sit in peace for a little bit. It was a solid 15 minutes of talking with relatives and hearing the kids laughing and yelling in the near distance out in the woods. But all of a sudden, the yelling turned to screams. Concerning sounding screams from the kids. All of us looked at each other, sitting up in concern. The kids one by one came running out of the woods, yelling that there's something in there. We don't have bears or any big predatory animals around here, so that was not the first thing we assumed it to be. I told all the kids to stay near the patio area. My brother Dom and I, being the biggest men there, decided to go investigate. We took a couple flashlights and off we went into the pitch-black woods. The only sounds we heard around us were crickets and other night bugs. So we went deeper, and that's when we started to hear something else. It sounded like an animal at first, but as we followed the sound to get closer, the sound started to become more human-like. We continued to walk, and we agreed we both had the feeling that we were being watched, like stalked. I put my arm out to stop Dom. Standing in the silence now,
The best way I could describe the sound we were hearing was a moaning, angry kind of sound. It sounded human, but it was a bizarre sound. Then, a few cracks of the leaves on the ground ahead of us. We aimed our lights over there, and there was someone or something behind the tree. The moaning sound stopped. Dom stepped forward and called out. What happened next was textbook horror movie stuff. A scream, so loud, so blood-curdling, so inhuman, filled the air. I'm sure it could be heard for miles. Dom and I turned and booked it back to the property. We waved at everyone to go inside when we made it back. Dom got on the phone with the sheriff's department. They said it was probably a wild animal. We wanted to insist it was a human, but we honestly couldn't. We to this day don't know who or what we saw and heard in those woods, but it was definitely stalking us and the kids when they were playing hide and seek. And that scream we heard, it just didn't sound human to us. With everyone playing Pokemon Go, the game that actually forces you to get outside and walk around to find Pokemon in pretty much the world's biggest scavenger hunt, the app is creating a lot of laughs, whether they be from pictures of Pokemon in some pretty funny locations or videos of angry player reactions. However, with so many people suddenly exploring places they never would have otherwise, some are finding things they weren't supposed to find, or perhaps getting into situations they don't want to be in. Number 1. A story just about everybody's heard about by now is 19-year-old Shayla Wiggins from Wyoming finding a dead body. Shayla was told to find a Pokemon in a natural water source, but instead found a man's corpse. She was walking towards a bridge along the shore when she saw something in the water, and after taking a second look, she realized it was a body. Shayla is currently living in a trailer park for the summer with her mother, and in said trailer park, Shayla hopped a fence to get to the Pokemon shown on her map. The body was found in the Big Wind River, however there didn't appear to be any foul play involved and was ruled accidental, likely a drowning. The sheriff's department is still currently looking into it, but as of right now, the actual story behind the death remains unknown. Shayla, of course, did not catch the Pokemon. Number 2. Another player of the game shared his experience on Reddit. The 32-year-old man explained how he found himself hunting for Pokemon for the first time at 4 in the morning walking home from work after working the night shift, and later encountered about 5 sketchy-looking men, from his own words, on his late-night stroll. The man told Reddit of the little park that he must pass on his way home every night. The park had 2 Pokestops and a gym, so he decided to walk through the park this one time just to see exactly what the stops were for and what they did. Somewhere through the park, however, the man ran into a group of 5 younger guys, 3 black, 2 white. They all looked as though they were in the middle of a drug deal. One of the guys called him over, to which he just ignored them. They started to follow him, and before he could even decide to run away or not, the sound of 2 police cars quickly pulling up on the road alongside the park froze everyone in their spots. The group was reported by an anonymous resident for a potential drug deal, which actually turned out to be the case. The man, though questioned, was let go shortly after. Number 3. To the Pokemon Company's dismay, many players, or trainers as they refer to them, have been victims of robbery. In fact, different YouTubers have actually posted video footage of themselves getting robbed while playing the game. For example, YouTuber Aiden's Life.
And that's when I found this.
Yo. Yo, what's up?
Can you put your shit in this bag real quick for me?
What?
No, like straight up, we're gonna have a problem.
Whoa, what the fuck?
Put it in the bag.
Are you serious?
Straight up.
Get away? Yeah.
Seeing something like this happen to someone so unsuspecting is scary, and something like this has apparently been happening every day. One of the bigger cases so far was the story of a group of armed robbers apparently targeting victims using the game, who had done so successfully up to 8 times. The group of 4 teenagers were apprehended by police in O'Fallon, Missouri on Sunday after allegedly robbing a 33-year-old man. Most of you know the app contains Pokestops, which are randomly placed on notable locations in towns where players can earn points, Pokeballs, and make purchases. The player has to actually walk to that location to earn the points, which are available to all players. The game also features a lore module, which attracts Pokemon to a specific Pokestop. This invites other players to come to the location and collect Pokemon as well. This is exactly how these 4 teenagers lured unsuspecting players, mostly kids, to this specific location where they robbed them. One of the victims shared his experience, explaining he was simply walking to a Pokestop in the night when 3 guys came out from behind a parked van with a handgun demanding money. 2 of the robbers were 18 years old, one 17, and another 16. The 16-year-old is the only robber not being charged as an adult. Number 4. More than 1 dead body has already been found by Pokemon Go players, not even 2 weeks after release. 3 women playing the game found a dead body on Thursday the 14th near a creek bed in a San Diego park. The 3 women were walking on a trail while hunting for Pokemon at about 3 p.m. in Marion Bear Memorial Park when they stumbled into the body of a man who had been dead for quite some time. One of the women had apparently picked up on a very pungent and foul odor, and that's when they noticed the body laying in a patch of bushes near the bed.
I froze, stopped in my tracks, turned away from the body, and I had looked at my friend Amanda in the face. I looked my sister in the face, and I said, I think I just found a dead body. I looked down and I saw the legs, the bones of a dead body with no feet, no ankles, no shoes, nothing. It had looked like he'd been chewed.
Police believe foul play is a possibility, but his death will be further investigated. But that's not even it with the dead bodies. You won't believe it, but yet another Pokemon Go player has stumbled into a dead body. This man's body was recovered the same past Thursday afternoon from a small stream behind the New Hampshire Holocaust Memorial in Nashua after it was spotted by someone playing the game. The game led the player to a rather obscure spot where he found the body. As of right now, the police don't believe that foul play was involved. The police are, however, becoming more and more grateful for the discoveries that the app is leading to. In fact, some police forces are already using the app to lure fugitives to certain locations. Now, I can't necessarily verify if this last one is 100% true or not, but this one comes from a Redditor named Esty Skalisk, who made a post which has since been deleted, sharing something really scary that happened to him while playing Pokemon Go. The Redditor stated that he's 13 years old and that a really creepy couple moved in across the street from him. A couple who could always be heard arguing within a certain radius from their house. The man would always sit on his stoop and watch the kid playing Pokemon Go around the block. One late night, close to midnight, he was playing the game doing his usual laps around the block, when he noticed one of the Pokestops on the block, which happened to be a church, had a lure enabled on it. When he stepped in front of the church, he could see the man from across the street hiding behind one of the church pillars. He simply kept walking, pretending like he didn't notice, and got home safely. This was posted only a couple days ago and has had no updates since. This whole story can very easily be true, as the app can in a sense be a predator's dream come true. A lot of players are on the younger side, and certain adults may familiarize themselves with the app in order to lure children into quieter areas. So if you play the game, take the loading screen a little seriously, because believe it or not, there has not been a single day since the game's release without news websites reporting armed robberies or even dead body discoveries linked to the game. But hey, you gotta catch them all, right?
The first video I did on this topic was relatively successful, and when I asked if you guys wanted a part 2, a lot of you did. For some reason I haven't gotten around to making a part 2 until now, so here it is. No intro needed, here are 5 more creepy and weird YouTube channels from the weirdest side of YouTube. Number 5. Marble Hornets. Fully known as Clear Lake's 44 Marble Hornets, is a channel featuring a series of strange and creepy videos that upon first glance seem like complete randomness. However, the videos on this channel actually formulate a story based on a character based off of Slender Man, who is referred to as the Operator. Early video entries on the channel consisted of tapes taken by a guy named Alex, who obsessively recorded himself in order to capture the Operator stalking him. Alex starts out as a main protagonist, eventually turning into an antagonist, believed to be working with the Operator.
Alex? Alex?
Eventually, the entries turn to videos taken by a guy named Jay, recording his efforts to unravel the mystery surrounding the Operator. Over time, Jay follows leads to old buildings, former homes, and even defunct and abandoned locations, and begins finding this being stalking his old friend may be deeper and far more dangerous than he ever thought, and there's a very good chance that Jay may now be hunted for getting too involved. There are a lot of videos with dialogue and story on the channel, but there are also a lot that don't seem to make any sense, and there are many videos with footage of the Operator, as well as other creepy antagonists. There's a similar channel titled To The Ark, which commonly responds to the videos created by Marble Hornets. Thus, it's most likely Marble Hornets' second channel. The videos in To The Ark's channel are much darker, more cryptic, and overall more disturbing. Some videos on this channel even feature a figure that may be the Operator. Like other similar weird channels on YouTube, To The Ark's videos contain cryptic messages that the viewers try to figure out and explain in the comments sections, but all they are theories. There are even other channels on YouTube that try to explain Marble Hornets and To The Ark, but once again, they can only be theories. If you want to try to follow the stories of these channels or find the connection between the two, you're free to click the links in the description. Number 4. Jack Torrance. No, not Jack Torrance from The Shining. The YouTube channel titled Jack Torrance features a large amount of disturbing and mysterious found footage videos that the uploader, Jack Torrance, allegedly found at an estate sale, which is basically a larger garage sale. Jack says he found these movies in 10 rather large boxes at the sale for $5 a box. It was being held about 15 miles west of Austin, Texas. There were some old records, which he also bought, some rusted tools, tons of paint cans, various other bits of old useless junk, and then these boxes. The people running the estate sale didn't seem to know that they were there and priced them for Jack on the spot. The films vary in formats ranging from old 35mm stock reels to Betamax. Many of the films are damaged beyond repair, but Jack and his friends are trying their best to repair and clean them up. He says, as we dig through the boxes, catalog and digitalize more videos and audio, we will post more. As of today, the last video was uploaded 7 months ago, but that doesn't mean that there won't be any more, as there have been upload gaps as long as 2 years in the past. Number 3. David Firth. David Firth, like Syriac, is a very talented animator who chooses to use his talent to create flat-out disturbing animations.
Billy Masters has been quite a naughty boy. Don't you understand this? I said, don't you understand this?
You may know him for his most famous animation, Salad Fingers, which is an extremely dark, creep-out and gross-out series that most likely takes place after nuclear war.
Hello.
A lot of David Firth's animations have the power to make your skin crawl, not because they're necessarily scary, but because they can be so disturbing that you actually start to feel uncomfortable. His videos aren't just limited to drawn animations. There are some that you may have expected to find on a channel like Neat instead. However, not all of David's videos are disturbing, just a select few that really stand out, earning his channel a spot on this list. Number 2, My Dark Journal. This channel features a large amount of just weird and creepy videos. There's no description to the channel, and there really is no real description to give. Each video is something completely different and weird in its own sense, though there may be some kind of story being told through the videos. The subscribers of the channel tend to claim that everything on the channel is real and not just a series like Marble Hornets. The channel has its fair share of creepy videos, as well as just flat out weird or pointless ones too. Like a lot of other weird YouTube channels, My Dark Journal has many cryptic messages in the videos, as well as a recurring image of a white mask. There are recurring characters who appear in the videos who are supposedly growing more insane as the videos go on, though there hasn't been a new one in 7 months. The channel has been said to have some kind of connection to the channel Meat, but that remains only a theory. Number 1, Nana825763. Truly a unique and strange YouTube channel, Nana is best known for his video username 666, which is a video of alleged footage of what would happen if you would try to reach username 666's channel back in the year 2008. If you don't know what username 666 is, that's a whole nother topic. There are a lot of dark themes and jump scares on this channel, with some videos starting out seemingly innocent and kid-friendly, then suddenly turning dark and disturbing. A lot of the later content on the channel consists of an ant and worm video diary with eerily happy music slapped in, and more often than not, an unnecessary jump scare is also slapped in. This channel has a weird mix of videos, with weird footage, trippy animations, and lots of ant and other bug videos. This channel may be a one-stop shop for some people looking to get their creep on. And that's it for this list. With all the weird YouTube channels out there, I would gladly turn this into a mini-series on the channel, but of course I would need to find more channels, so if you know of any, leave them in the comments. Ouija boards have long been a supposed way to connect with spirits and demons. They're sold in most board game aisles and toy stores, and work by one or more participants placing their hands on a plastic or wood piece called a planchette with a small glass circle in it, which is used to highlight a single letter on the board. The participants are then supposed to ask any question, and the piece is supposed to move to form answers out of the letters, supposedly by spirits. The game is normally played as a gag within groups of friends, and the piece is usually moved by one of the participants as a joke, or even unintentionally. However, there are countless stories of people who claim to have actually contacted demons and had serious repercussions because of it. Number 6. A mother and daughter who were reportedly told during a Ouija board session that they would soon die were both critically ill in the hospital following a fire at their home, which was engulfed in flames mere hours after the Ouija board made its grim predictions. The two were treated in a hospital after the fire. It's said that the mother and daughter used the Ouija board in an attempt to contact their dead dog on the night before the fire. This beloved family pet was dismembered and killed by the mother's husband, Paul Carroll, who initially claimed he killed the dog because it became possessed following a previous Ouija board session. Paul was sentenced later that month for causing unnecessary suffering to an animal. Following the Ouija board session where the mother and daughter attempted to contact their deceased dog, their neighbor Donna Sowerby revealed that Katrina Livingstone had confessed that the Ouija board had predicted their deaths. Number 5. St. Andrew's Boarding School in Delaware is a well-known private boarding school with a very positive reputation, which may make it more surprising that a group of boys snuck out past curfew one night to use a Ouija board in the woods. The group of 4 came prepared, equipped with candles and a flat surface to place the board and candles on. The 4 boys asked the board various questions, playing religiously, trying not to make a joke of it. There was no movement until one of the boys asked the question, "Will anything bad happen in my future?" The piece then slowly began to move, spelling out the words, "right now." One of the boys, Ferlin Mako, suddenly started twitching and jerking his arms and head. He then turned and focused on one of the boys next to him with a devilish stare before lunging at him and screaming, "I don't know you." The 2 other boys grabbed Ferlin off of him and he shortly passed out. The 3 boys carried him back to his dorm room, where they left him in his bed. The next morning, Ferlin showed no signs of remembrance from the previous night. They fessed up and took him to the nurse to see what could have been wrong with him, but of course, she didn't have much of an explanation. Number 4. A Redditor who says he was about 12 or 13 was spending the night at his friend Michael's house, goofing around with a Ouija board with Michael and his sister in their basement. They were just kind of scaring themselves, moving the planchette around for fun, not taking it very seriously, when they got a rather disturbing message. They asked the question, "Where are you?" And in response, the planchette started spelling something. I-C-A-N. It continued on until it spelled out the sentence, "I can see you through the window." The 3 kids laughed, thinking one of the others spelled out the phrase. There was a small window in the basement room where they were, and just the backyard and woods past the driveway were visible through the window, though it was much too dark to see anything outside. They all looked at the window anyway as a kind of natural response, and as they did, they heard that sound. The stomach-churning sound of someone or something from outside in the dark backyard at 11:30 at night viciously knocking on the basement window. Being the young kids they were, they all screamed until Michael's dad came rushing downstairs. When they explained what happened to his dad, he took them outside with the backyard lights on to search for anyone who may be lurking around. As soon as they told him about what the Ouija board said, Michael's dad ushered them inside and suggested they go to bed. That was when he stopped believing what the kids had said. Number 3. In 2014, 3 American friends were taken to the hospital after reportedly becoming possessed by evil spirits while playing with a Ouija board. Alexandra Huerta, aged 22, was playing the game with her brother Sergio, aged 23, and 18-year-old cousin Fernando Cuevas at a house in the village of San Juan in southwest Mexico. But minutes into it, she apparently started growling and thrashing around in a trance-like state, as this video captures.
tranquila ya. ¿Te vale?
Meanwhile, Sergio and Fernando also reportedly started showing signs of possession, including feelings of blindness, deafness, and hallucinations. Paramedics were called and took the three to the hospital. They restrained Alexandra to prevent her from hurting herself before treating the three with painkillers, anti-stress medication, and eye drops, which seemingly worked. The director of public safety in a nearby town said the medical rescue of these three was very complicated. They had involuntary movements, and it was very difficult to transfer them to the nearest hospital because they were so erratic. He said they spoke of feeling numbness, double vision, blindness, deafness, hallucinations, muscle spasms, and difficulty swallowing. Alexandra's parents called paramedics after a local Catholic priest refused to perform an exorcism on the three because they were not regular churchgoers. Number 2. Three brothers were using a Ouija board while their parents were out on a cold, rainy night. They were playing the game on the dining room table with the lights dimmed, asking typical questions. They started with questions like, "What is my name?" and "What is your name?" which didn't summon any responses. Then they asked the question, "Is anybody there?" which caused the planchette to slowly move to the word "yes" at the top of the board. The boys then asked the board, "When will we die?" and the board formed the sentence, "Death comes now." Only minutes later, they received a disturbing phone call. It was the boy's father on the other end, crying hysterically. He told one of the boys that he swerved off the road into a tree and their mom died on impact. The dad later blamed himself for driving without getting enough sleep and said he thought he saw someone standing in the middle of the road, so he tried to swerve out of the way, but the slippery roads only caused him to lose control off the road. Number 1. Frank and Sarah Piscatelli and their friend Joe Pedenzin were in their basement playing with a Ouija board on December 15th, 2013. A recent event motivated them to try the Ouija board. Apparently, Frank and Sarah's grandmother contacted her dead husband just days before she passed away using one. Frank and Sarah wanted to contact their grandmother, so they brought along a friend to bring in more energy to the board to increase the chances of getting a response. Instead of contacting their grandmother, however, they allegedly contacted a demon who introduced itself as Zozo. Instead of answering the questions the kids asked, the board spelled out random answers that didn't even relate to the questions. Frank demanded that the demon let them speak to their grandmother, and that's when the lights clicked off in the basement. The power did not go out. They all heard the light switch flick off from the bottom of the stairs. One of them grabbed a flashlight and shined it over to the bottom of the stairs. And for a brief moment, saw a black figure standing by the light switch. Even in the light provided by the flashlight, the figure was completely black. Just as suddenly, the lights turned back on and the figure was gone. The three ran upstairs and locked the basement door. The next day, they tucked the Ouija board back in the closet and never touched it again. Frank and Sarah both agreed that the black figure they saw resembled their grandmother. If you're like most people, you've probably at one point had the experience of your alarm clock becoming a part of your dream before waking up, or perhaps had some other sound like the TV you left on before falling asleep influence your dreams. But what would happen if reality influenced your dreams during a nightmare? Well, it would probably only add to the horror. While all of the stories on this list are creepy, some are more unexplainable than others. Here are 5 first-hand stories of people whose nightmares have strangely read into reality. Number 5. This story was submitted to me by Earl Feinhardt. It was a long and stressful day, so falling asleep was easy. I think a dream started to fade in around halfway through the night. It wasn't a pleasant dream. I'll try to describe it the best I could. I was in the woods outside of a giant castle. Everything was black except for the night sky, which had a hint of blue. I remember this horrifying sound coming from inside the castle, as if something were calling me. It's downright disturbing to think about it even now. The sound was some kind of demonic, hellish voice, and it echoed through the woods. I somehow knew it was coming from inside the castle, and yet it sounded as if the source of the sound was a few hundred feet away from me. This was not a lucid dream. I had no conscious control over myself, so I made my way to the castle. There were no doors. It was as if the inside of this castle was also the outside. I don't know how else to describe it. The sound of the demonic voice was no doubt getting louder, and as I walked the open corridors of the castle, the halls started to become more narrow, and I felt myself banging into the walls as I dragged myself along. The sounds of the screaming were coming from beyond a door on my left. I entered, and I swear to God, there was nothing but blackness in the room, and yet I still felt myself moving closer to the sound. I banged into something, and that's when I woke up, hunched over my 4-year-old son's bed, who was crying and horrified. He had been screaming because he also had a nightmare, and I scared him even more, as he described the way I walked in and then stopped in front of his bed, slowly lowering myself closer to him. Number 4. This story was posted by a forum user named Joey Mancuso. I just want to point out before sharing my story that I am an atheist and do not believe in any kinds of miracles, gods, or anything of that sort. However, I still don't know how to explain this. I was having a really disturbing dream. It seemed to be Halloween night, and I was with my friends trick-or-treating. We hit 2 houses. The first one was normal from what I remember. When we rang the doorbell to a second house, the door opened on its own into a darkish blue living room. I stepped inside, and my friends were gone at this point. I looked around the room I was in. The door I had just entered from no longer existed. In fact, the whole room seemed to have rapidly changed appearance, a common occurrence in dreams. After exploring the house, I came to a room upstairs, even though I didn't remember climbing the stairs. On the wall I was facing was a giant framed picture, at least 10 meters long and 20 meters wide. The picture was of my 30-year-old cousin, who I hadn't seen in years. Her eyes were enlarged to an uncomfortable amount, and they followed me everywhere I went. The giant portrait suddenly cracked, and the rusty, scratchy, ear-piercing sound of the giant nails holding the portrait on the wall painfully filled my eardrums. The portrait started to fall off the wall, and I watched, completely frozen, as it fell on top of me. But before it could crush me, I was awake. It was maybe 5 in the morning. Minutes after waking up, my cell phone rang. I picked up. It was my uncle calling to tell me that my cousin had just overdosed on heroin and died. Number 3. I was having a nightmare that started off with me in my house reading a newspaper. Then the lights went out, and the dream started to focus on my trying to find out why the power was cut. The fuse box was apparently in the basement in this dream, which is, by the way, inaccurate to real life. I went down to the basement with a flashlight and opened up the fuse box. There was a sticky note inside saying, "Go back upstairs to the red room." While still in the basement, I started to hear a moaning type sound coming from the boiler room / laundry room. My brain knew my childhood fears, and it seemed to be taking advantage of them in this nightmare. The door to the boiler room cracked open, and something poked its head out to look at me. I left the basement after seeing this, following the sticky note's orders. I went upstairs to the second floor of the house, and there was a glowing red door at the end of the hall, a door that doesn't actually exist in my real house. Now there was a disturbing echoing sound coming from beyond the door, and as I got closer, it became more clear that it was a voice chanting the number 314, 314. I opened the door and there was just a chair in the room, facing the wall across from me. The room was as red as the glow that had been illuminating through the door. The voice chanting 314 was clearer now. It was an extremely creepy voice, almost feeling like it was speaking into my ear. I woke up abruptly, with my heart beating somewhat quickly. I grabbed my iPhone that was sitting on the desk next to me to check the time. It was 3:14 a.m. You may think I just saw a clock while half awake or something, but I have no digital clocks in my room. The only clock would be the one on my iPhone that was in the same position as I had left it before going to bed. To this day, I have no idea how my dream knew it was 3:14, or if there was supposed to be some kind of meaning behind it. Number 2. This one was from an Ask Reddit post. It was a night during the summer 2015. I was high out of my mind after a party. I was fortunate enough to not get caught by my parents as I walked to my room to get straight to bed. I was at the part of my high where I was just exhausted and wanted to get some sleep, and so I fell asleep in probably 10 minutes or less. Have you ever heard about that idea that smoking pot and then going to sleep high alters your dreams or gives you some kind of enhanced dreaming capabilities? Well, after this one, I won't be fighting that theory. I don't remember anything before this dream. It started out with me in the woods in the middle of the night. In real life, you would just be surrounded by trees and the sounds of night critters, nothing special. But being that this was a dream, it was much worse. There were ghostly wind sounds coming from everywhere. Instead of bug noises, there were wolf howls and sounds of footsteps coming from behind me. There was that magically horrifying feeling of a dream that you just can't describe, but it made it so much more than just being trapped in the woods. I found myself running away from the footsteps that were consistently the same distance behind me until reaching a building in the middle of the woods. Of course, I went inside and boarded the door shut with planks that seemed to have come out of nowhere. This dream seemed to have gone on forever, too long to describe it all, but to summarize, I was in that building, which turned out to be a house, and the footsteps that were following me from outside were circling the house. I tried to find a weapon, but the house was almost completely empty. Everything was black and white at this point. While sitting on a couch in the living room, one of the only pieces of furniture there was a shadow that appeared at the window, and shortly after, the figure standing outside knocked on the window. It kept knocking and knocking until I woke up, but the knocking didn't stop. I jumped out of bed when I realized someone was at my window, looking in and knocking. I squealed for my dad, and the figure at the window ran off. I'm still open to the possibility that my high hadn't completely worn off, and that it might have been a partial wake-up hallucination, but it was also so real that, at the same time, I have to believe it actually happened. The sound was real, and the figure at my window was real. My dad and I looked around the property to find no one. He told me I just had a bad dream and to go back to sleep. I hope he was right. Number 1. I was having a horrifying dream, possibly the most disturbing nightmare of my life. I was in my house, or the closest thing to my house that my dream could produce. Ironically enough, I was in bed in this dream, or at least I can only start remembering past the point of my lying in bed, and all of a sudden, the sound came from downstairs. I walked downstairs in the dark, not turning on any lights, to where I thought the sound was coming from. I was on my middle floor now. The dream was telling me to go downstairs to my laundry room, and so I did. But as I got there, expecting the noise to be louder and closer, it sounded like it was just as far as before. Now I was going upstairs to the kitchen, and it's strange. Outside of every window was complete blackness, not general nighttime darkness. There was nothingness. I think all that existed in this dream was my house. Now my dream started to suggest that the banging sounds were coming from upstairs, so I went back upstairs, and was eventually led to the attic door. It was surely beyond that door. I opened it. There was an old woman standing by a bunch of boxes. She was slowly but loudly slamming her hand on one of the boxes, producing an unnatural sound. I tried to quietly step back away from the attic, but the old woman turned around, opened her mouth twice as wide as anyone humanly could, reached out her arms, began to scream, and leaped toward me. That's when I woke up. I thought it was just a horrific dream, but when I heard a bang coming from downstairs, a bang similar to what I heard in my dream, I felt my heart completely drop. On my way downstairs, there was another bang. It was the front door. I got the butcher knife from my knife holder in the kitchen and crouched behind the door. I was waiting for the next time he would pound on the door and I would warn him to go away. I waited for a good minute in silence and finally decided to take a quick look through the window. There was somebody standing in my driveway. I couldn't tell if he was facing me or looking at me or not, but he was surely the one who was pounding on my door at 4 a.m. He walked away down the sidewalk moments after he must have noticed me. The pounding on my door was the kind of pounding you would expect from someone trying to break in a door, not to get a house owner's attention. I thought it was just crazy and horrifying that the pounding and banging from this potential robber or killer didn't wake me up, rather became the key point to a horrifying dream.
When I was 21 years old, I worked the maintenance and custodial position at the nearby daycare down the block. My job entailed disposing of trash, moving and setting up furniture for special events, performing preventative maintenance, keeping supplies organized, maintaining and cleaning the facility, caring for equipment, and overall maintaining a safe environment, which included reporting suspicious activity that may lead to child abuse or mistreatment. Some days I'd even be the one both opening and closing the facility. It was a pretty demanding job since it was just me and one older guy who was more or less my boss. Most of the time I'd be the one to lock up the place, as he would go home earlier. The daycare building is on the grounds of a Catholic school and church, though I'm pretty sure the daycare was open to anybody, regardless of religion. The older worker, who I'll just refer to as Bob, was leaving early this one day. It must have been a Friday because he always left early on Fridays. He told me the things I needed to get done before cleaning up. Start with the usual clean up the classrooms, and also pack the rest of the Thanksgiving decorations from the classrooms back into the crates, bring them down to the basement, and then start bringing the Christmas crates upstairs. These crates contain decorations that would be used all over the building, from the lobby to the hallways to the classrooms. The childcare staff would be the ones to do the actual decorating, but it was my job to clean up all of it and bring the crates up and downstairs. Since it was now after Thanksgiving, it was time for Christmas decorations to be brought up. All the kids and staff were gone by this point. It was dark out between 6 and 7 o'clock. I was the only one left in the building, so I locked all the doors while I continued my work. I went down to the basement, which was used mostly for storage. Since it was cold out and we were past outdoor play season, all the outdoor toys that were usually in the courtyard play area were downstairs in the basement. This included but wasn't limited to plastic slides and those toy cars that kids would move themselves in with their feet. The basement consisted of a hallway which passed the boiler room and the hot water heaters, and at the end of the hallway was the storage room. This room always had a creepy vibe to it, mostly because of the lighting, or lack thereof. There was no direct overhead lighting down there. It was just two sketchy dim lights in the corners, and then the small light from the hallway. The basement ceiling also wasn't high. I had to slightly crouch to avoid hitting my head in certain spots. It was like a hybrid of a basement and a crawl space. But then again, I'm 6'3", so to shorter people this wasn't an issue. The basement had a bunch of small windows that would make it decently bright down there during the daytime, but obviously at this point it was dark. So I would use a flashlight. I brought the Thanksgiving containers down one by one, putting them near to the front of the basement just because I was lazy and wanted to go home and likely start the weekend. I was lugging one of the Christmas containers up the stairs and through the hallway when I heard a kid's voice and then laughing. It was very muffled, but I definitely knew what I heard. I stopped pushing the container and started looking around the place. I checked every classroom, then the indoor playroom, then the art room, then the bathrooms, every room I could think of. There were no kids in there. I kept hearing that muffled voice every once in a while, though. The one place I didn't check was the basement. I walked back to the basement door and looked down the stairs, waiting. I heard a noise come from down there. The realization that there was a kid down there dawned on me, and so I ran down the stairs yelling, "Who's down there?" thinking one of the kids snuck down there. I got to the bottom and ran the basement hallway to the storage room. I saw one of the toy cars moving for like a second before coming to a halt. It was 100% as if it had just been pushed. I stood in place and looked around the room. I didn't see any kids that could have just pushed that car. I said, "Anyone down here?" multiple times. It was dead silent. The silence was actually deafening. I started actually looking inside the boxes and containers, thinking a kid could be hiding in one of them. But halfway through, I started realizing there was no way a kid could close any of these containers or boxes on top of themselves. At this moment, I felt like I was alone, but that I also wasn't. I can't explain it. And then, right behind me, I heard something plastic drop to the floor. There was no draft whatsoever down in that basement. I didn't even turn to see what it was. I just fled to the upstairs without looking back. I stopped at the top of the stairs again, and when I heard what I could only describe as a child's whisper down there, I slammed the door shut. I didn't know what else to do except call Bob, and in short, he said if I think there's a kid down there that I need to call the police. The scary thing is, I didn't think there was a kid down there, but I still called 911. I just couldn't leave without confirming. And I was right that there were no kids down there, because with the help of a couple police officers, when we looked down there, there was nothing but a bunch of boxes and containers full of supplies and decorations. I also couldn't find anything on the floor that could have made that plastic sound dropping on the floor. Given the fact that there was nowhere else to hide down there, and no one reported their kids missing, the cops could do nothing except leave. I could tell the cops felt like I wasted their time, but I was too disturbed to be embarrassed of the police call. I quit right before Christmas, before I ever had to go back down to that basement again. This happened not too long ago. I live alone in my apartment. I'd like to get it out of the way that I don't take any medication, nor am I diagnosed with anything that would impair my awareness or cause me to hallucinate. This night was a one-time incident that I can't explain, and I really hope it stays a one-time incident. I had a long day at work. I work as a construction worker in the city, and I go to the gym 4 to 5 days a week on top of it. So depending on the projects we're working on at work, when I get home, I'm ready to collapse on a couch. After work and the gym one night, I stopped for food on the way home because there was no way on earth I was about to cook. I was shot. I got home and plopped the Chipotle I just bought on the ottoman in my living room, and I just laid out on the couch as I ate. This was later in the week, so I was already tiring out. I demolished the Chipotle, and I definitely could have eaten more, but I was honestly so tired that I actually fell asleep on the couch while watching TV. I woke up a few hours later, realizing it was like 11 o'clock at night. I was so comfortable on the couch under the blanket, honestly, that I didn't want to get up, but I realized I left my contacts in, so I went to the bathroom to take them out, and at that point, I went to my bedroom to just go to sleep in my actual bed. Walking to my room, I heard my name called from the living room. All I could think was, what the actual fuck? It was a female's voice. I turned back around and went into the living room. I flicked on the light, but the room was too blurry. I said, "Who was that? Mom?" No answer. I had to go get my glasses from my room if I wanted to see. I made my way to my nightstand and grabbed my glasses, and then went back out to the living room. I was the only breathing soul in here. My apartment isn't huge, it's just the kitchen and living room, which are one space, then my bedroom and a bathroom. Not many places to look, and not many places to hide. But there also shouldn't have been anyone in my apartment. I called my mom just to confirm she wasn't here, and I apparently woke her up with my phone call, so that answered that. I chalked it up to a brain fart moment, because clearly no one was in here, and so I went to bed. It wasn't as easy to fall asleep this time, because now all I was thinking about was how I just heard a voice say my name. It was when I was finally seemingly starting to fall asleep that I heard a female voice say my name again, from inside the bedroom. I flipped over on my back and looked across the room. All I could see was this big, tall, human-shaped mass a few feet in front of my bed. I could see the long hair of a woman, and I could barely see what I must have imagined to be distorted facial features. I let out a harrowing scream as I fumbled for the light switch or my glasses. I knocked over the lamp as I finally found the switch to turn it on, and now there was nothing at the end of my bed. I put on my glasses and searched every nook and cranny of the room, under the bed, the closets, and the dresser. Then I checked the rest of the apartment. I can say matter-of-factly that there was no one but me in this apartment. I felt like I was losing my mind. The only way I managed to go to sleep that night in that apartment was convincing myself I had hallucinated these things because of my lack of sleep or overworking myself. When I tell people about this, I downplay it, saying, yeah, I hallucinated this one time. I don't go into detail about how real it all was, because then some people get doubtful or think I was on drugs. It was without a doubt the scariest, most surreal moment of my life, hallucination or not.
I'm 27 years old, living with my brother James in a house we share. Never had anything severely strange or abnormal happen to me in my life, but there was this one week that I experienced this strange series of events. It started on what I thought would be a normal night like any other. I was in the kitchen washing the dishes before getting ready for bed. Suddenly, a plastic cup came crashing to the floor, and the sound of it made me jump and spin around from the sink. I saw the blue plastic cup bounce a few times, then fall dead on the floor. This was one of the cups that sits up top the cabinet. I knew it had to have been sitting upright though. I had no idea what kind of force could have knocked it off the cabinet. It made no logical sense. I picked it up and put it back on the cabinet. That wasn't the last strange event that night though. While in bed with the blinds shut, there was suddenly a strange, very faint glow in my room. It came through the blinds. I flipped over onto my side and tried to peek under the crack at the bottom of the blinds, but I couldn't see anything. Honestly, as weird as it was, I was so comfortable in bed and was too lazy to go lift the blinds. I dismissed the light as something like a street light having a new bulb or something. I know, a little ridiculous, but at the time I had no reason to suspect anything paranormal. The next day I was home alone when James was at work. It was a dark, stormy day, and the house was constantly rumbling from the thunder, so when I heard a cup fall from the kitchen, I associated it with the thunder. I went to the kitchen to pick it up, and realized it was the same blue plastic cup I'd carefully put back on the cabinet yesterday. There was no way thunder could have knocked it down from where it was. I put it on the counter and stood there, confused and a bit shaken, looking around the kitchen, not knowing what to think. As I was standing in the kitchen, I heard a creak in the floor above me. The room above me was actually my bedroom. I went to the stairs and called up for James, but I instantly remembered he wasn't home. Maybe it was the thunder shaking the whole house. But still, I had to check my room just for peace of mind. I went up the stairs to my room and turned on the lights, given that all the rooms in the house were dark due to the weather. My room is square-shaped with 2 big closets. The room was clear, as were the closets, so I shut the light and went back downstairs. That night, when James got home, I had a discussion with him about the strange events that had been taking place. He said he hadn't been aware of any of it. Still, nothing that happened up until that point was extremely unusual. For the rest of the night, things were normal, and I fell asleep with ease. I awoke at some off hour in the night. It was still dark. I checked my phone. It was 2 in the morning. I rolled back on my side and shut my eyes. When I heard the distinct sound of a finger tapping on a window, I could feel my heart in my throat. I didn't know why someone would be knocking at my window, but I didn't want to see who could be out there. But for some reason, it took me that long to realize I was on the 2nd floor of the house, and therefore nobody could be on the outside of my window. I pushed the sheets off my body and flipped to face the window. There was no one standing there on the inside though. So I lifted the blind, and there was no one outside either. Still, I knew that I heard what I heard, and I knew I hadn't been imagining or dreaming it. I ran to my brother's room and started freaking out. I don't know whether he believed me or not. Quite frankly, I don't think I'd believe me if I hadn't experienced it. I slept in the living room that night, and it's been 3 weeks now without any paranormal incidents. I never believed in the supernatural until this happened. I once took a road trip from New Hampshire to Florida. I had to stop at a hotel to sleep overnight when I was about halfway there. It was some old, somewhat dilapidated hotel that rested off the highway on a quiet road. There were like 2 cars in the parking lot, so there were definitely not a lot of guests. The lady at the front desk was very robotic and seemed bored with her job. She seemed to fit the atmosphere of the hotel perfectly. The lobby was full of tacky chairs and tables you'd expect to find put out on the curb. The wallpapers were all dated and equally tacky. Didn't matter though, I wasn't staying there for the luxury. Just for the night and for the convenience. It was late when I checked in, so when I got in the room, all I did was take out my toothbrush and brush my teeth before jumping into the hotel bed. I turned out the lamp next to the bed and tried to go to sleep, not looking forward to the long day of driving I had ahead of me the next day. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I looked at the bedside clock to be sure that it was almost midnight. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Apparently the peephole didn't work though, because I couldn't see out into the hallway through it. All I saw was black. I looked down at the crack under the door, but didn't see any outlines of feet blocking the light, so I opened the door just a little bit to peek into the hallway. When I didn't see anyone standing in front of the door, I opened it fully and then peeked down both sides of the hallway. It was clear. So I had to suddenly question if someone in this relatively vacant hotel was pranking me. I shut the door, locked it with the bolt this time, and went to lay back down in the bed. But then it happened again, a knock at the door. This time I jumped out of the bed, ran to the door, and checked the peephole again. Shockingly, all I saw was the empty hallway outside. But it hit me. This time I could actually see through the peephole. I unbolted the door and opened it. No one. I looked down both sides of the hallway again, and there was no one. This was where I drew the line. I grabbed the key to the room and went to the lady at the front desk. I told her someone kept knocking on my door, and politely asked her to check the cameras to see who it could be. She said they didn't have cameras in the hallways. Her reaction also wasn't what I was hoping for. She seemed very calm and disconcerted with what I told her. She said in a calm voice there was only one other guest in the whole building. Then she just stared blankly at me. I'm not sure how she thought her response properly acknowledged my concern, or what she expected me to say, but I could tell she wouldn't be of any help with the matter, so I left her and went back to my room. I locked the door with the bolt again. This time I put on my headphones and put on one of those 10-hour sleep relaxation videos on YouTube. This would not only help me get to sleep, but block out any possible future sounds from whoever was deciding to mess with me. And it worked. For a while at least. Eventually I flipped from my side to my back, just looked around the room. My head froze when I was staring at the corner. I sat up to try to get a closer look at what I thought I was seeing. I swear it looked like a giant humanoid figure, like a 10-foot tall human, standing right in the corner, head to the ceiling. When I put that image together in my head, I felt a sudden rush of horror in my body. I jumped across the bed to flick on the lamp, but when the room lit up, there was nothing in that corner of the room. I simply sat there with my heart beating probably 200 beats per minute. I gave myself a couple minutes to calm down before shutting the light back off and laying back down on my side. I still had the headphones in my ears playing the relaxation video. It helped calm me down a little bit. I didn't last even 2 minutes without sitting back up and examining the room again, however. And there it was in the corner, what looked to be a 10-foot tall humanoid figure. I crawled to the edge of the bed to get as close a look as I could before practically shitting myself. I saw what I was sure was a long arm at the side, moving. I dove to turn on the lamp again, and the corner was empty again. I didn't stick around that time. I packed up my few things in a matter of seconds and left the room. I gave the key to the woman and said I'm checking out early. She didn't even say a word as I stormed out that front door of the hotel. I continued driving until I found another hotel, where I fell fast asleep with no supernatural disturbances. As a kid, I had a bedroom on the first floor. Money was a little tight, and our mom was taking care of 4 kids. I was the youngest, so I had the little room. My room was next to the living room, a small square room with wood flooring. There were 2 big vents in the floor in this room in 2 opposite corners, and also 2 vents in the ceiling. My bed took up half the room. Like I said, it was a very small room. I'll keep it short and straight to the point. I was 13 years old doing my homework on my bed since I didn't have a desk in my room, when I heard a child's laughter. I went outside my room to look around the living room and kitchen for any of my siblings. Everyone seemed to be upstairs though. Usually in these kinds of stories, you hear people say they just chalk these kinds of things up to their imagination, but that's stupid. I definitely heard that laughter. There's no way I imagined something so clear. I continued my homework, but with one ear perked up listening for any other suspicious sounds. Eventually enough time passed that I was able to move past it. In fact, it seems it was just about when I was able to get over it that I heard it again. A child's laughter. Or more so, giggling, I should say. This time it went on longer. It wasn't coming from outside my room. It was somewhere in the room. I figured one of my brothers were hiding from me. I followed the sound of the laughter, strangely to the corner of my room. Then I looked down at the vent on the floor. It was coming from inside the vent. I got down on my knees and pressed my ear up to the vent. There was no more giggling at this point though. When there was a silence for a few seconds, I lifted my ear from the vent and then put my eyes up to the vent to get a peek inside. It took me a second to realize I was staring at a pair of eyes looking back up at me. I shrieked like a girl and screamed for my mom. She came storming into my room moments later, but of course the noises were gone, as were the eyes. My mom thought I was going crazy due to a lack of sleep, but I refused to sleep in that room, so she let me sleep in her room that night. That went on for a week actually, before she put her foot down. I spent the next 4 years in that same bedroom before we moved, and nothing paranormal ever happened to me since that one particular night.
Marissa was 23 years old when she matched with who she thought was a 25-year-old guy from town named Luke. The two were chatting on Tinder and seemingly hitting it off, so they exchanged numbers. After texting for a while talking about music and sports, the chat shifted to a more sexual tone. Marissa was on Tinder looking for casual sex, and when this topic came up, Luke said he was looking for the same thing. After chatting for a while longer, Luke suggested Marissa come by to his house since he has the place to himself. Interestingly, Luke didn't give an address until after he asked Marissa what area she's from, and when she did, he gave an address that was conveniently close to her, walking distance as a matter of fact. Before agreeing to come over to Luke's house though, she requested they have a phone call first. The two had a phone call, and Luke sounded like a normal, young guy. They joked around on the phone for a bit, until Marissa was comfortable enough to agree to go over. Deciding to go early, just to pass the house and scope it out first, Marissa walked about 10 minutes through the neighborhood until she got to the block. It was late at night, so a lot of houses had their lights off, and there were no cars out on the road. Marissa passed the house, and noticed 2 cars in the driveway and a car parked in front. All the lights were out. It didn't look like a house with just a guy alone. This was already a red flag, so she went back down the block and texted him, "I'm almost there." He replied, "Oh, you're early. Almost ready, walk slow." Marissa was getting bad vibes, so she started slowly inching back in the direction of her house, at a pace that allowed her to stall a bit longer for a reply from Luke confirming that she was okay to come in. But suddenly Marissa heard a car approaching the intersection down the block behind her. She turned to see a white van with no headlights on, turning onto the street. Marissa ran to hide behind the side of a house, and she watched as the van parked on the side of the road. The van just sat there, nobody got out. It was parked a few houses away from the given address. Then, Marissa got a text from Luke, saying, "Okay, I'm ready. Let me know when you're on my block, I'll come out." Marissa turned and started running down the block, inconspicuously though, making sure to stay close to the houses she passed and not on the sidewalk or close to the street. She ran most of the way home and blocked the number, also reporting the Tinder profile. Just to be on the safe side, Marissa and her mother went to the address the Luke person gave, and the woman who opened the door denied even having any sons. Marissa and her mother went to a police station to report this incident, just so that the authorities could be aware of it and link any future reports to it as well. By the sound of it, due to Marissa's cautiousness, she narrowly avoided being abducted by the driver of that van. This was the Tinder match between a guy named Chaz and who he thought were two girls around his age. This is how the conversation went. "My friend and I think you're really cute. I hope your friend is also a girl, lol. She is silly. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Where are you ladies from?" Then they share their locations, which aren't far. The other profile asks, "Are you busy tonight?" "Yes, I am. I'll be hanging with you two." "Yes, want to come around 10? "Yeah, where do you live?" "Wait, actually our parents are both home. Want to meet at the park? We can find a place to hang there." "I guess we can do that. My parents are home too, damn." "What time should we meet there, 10? "Yes." "Okay, what are your numbers?" "Let's just message on here until we meet." "Damn, I see how it is. Gotta earn your trust." "Yes, we're heading over now, okay?" "Okay, Sam, I'll probably be there like 10:10. "Okay, perfect. Where exactly in the park do you want to meet?" "You can meet by the statue on the dirt path. It's like a dog walking path. No one will be there this late. Then we could find a better spot from there together." "Okay, I looked it up. I think I know how to get there. I'll message you when I'm there, okay?" "Okay." Chaz then arrives to the destination in the park, and he sends a message saying he's here. He follows it up with, "This is kinda creepy, are you guys here?" This was the last message he sent the profile before it unmatched him, and then he was left alone in the woods in the park on a dirt path completely void of any people. Chaz knew at this point that he had been tricked, but he didn't know just yet if he was just pranked or if he had walked into a trap. But then he started to hear noises in the woods, like the snapping of twigs and leaves on the ground, indicating he was being watched. He already had his phone out, using it as a flashlight to navigate his way to the agreed meetup point. So at this point he decided to start recording for his own protection. This was the footage he captured. In this footage, you can easily see that as he pointed his light into the woods where he heard another sound, it revealed someone in the woods, who then started to run out from the trees and chase after Chaz. While running, Chaz stopped recording to turn off the flashlight, then ran into the trees to hide. He started recording again when he thought he had lost the person chasing him. He kept recording the rest of his way out of the park and back to his car to have video evidence of anything in case of a worst case scenario. Luckily, Chaz made it back to his car and home in one piece. He tried reporting the profile to Tinder just based off the screenshots he took, but Tinder got back to him saying they're unable to find any profiles that match the description or pictures. Chaz was obviously not wise to enter a suspicious situation like this. The other profiles' refusal to give their number, as well as meeting anyone for the first time in a park by the woods at night where nobody else would be around, are two major red flags that this was some kind of trap. He was lucky to have gotten away. The girl who submitted this to me wasn't the one to match this profile, rather it was her friend Maddie. The profile was titled Invincibles, and it claimed to be some guy, or rather a pair of people including this Chelsea person, who would pay someone to kick the man in the picture in his groin. This is the story in the girl's words. One of my best friends, a girl named Maddie, was on Tinder one day when she stumbled upon this account. It was supposedly dedicated to finding people to kick a guy in the groin for a payment of between $50 and $100. Of course, my friend, needing money because of the pandemic and such, swiped right on him. He quickly messaged her back that there were several people involved in this, including a girl named Chelsea, who we're not sure if they were even actually real to this day. We live in a small town in Pennsylvania, and this account was listed in a couple towns over in Clearfield. My friend Maddie was of course a bit skeptical about this, so she messaged me so that she could come have some sort of backup when she went to do this.
The account stated that they were doing this for a YouTube video, and the guy who was being kicked had lost a bet at a bar a couple weekends before. I agreed to accompany my friend because I also was a bit skeptical, but I had enough confidence that I could protect her if things happened to go south. The next day, after my friend agreed to meet with the people, we set off towards Clearfield. The address the account gave us led to a random hotel in Clearfield, which already sort of creeped us out. The whole setting seemed off, and I'd better include that my friend Maddie had never mentioned that she'd be bringing anyone with her. We arrived at the hotel and sat for maybe an hour, if not a little less, waiting for the person to get back to us. They ended up saying that they would be a little late, and to sit tight. After the prolonged waiting, the person eventually mentioned that they were back in town. Instead of meeting at the hotel, they suggested that we just come straight to their house instead. Already I was feeling a little off, but I had confidence that I could defend my friend against any harm that may have came her way. So we set off to this guy's house, and in under 10 minutes, we eventually made it there. At first I felt relieved, as the address he gave us led to a big normal-looking house, right next to the main road. But upon further investigation, there was a creepy-looking shed behind the house, with an even creepier-looking man peering from out the side of the door to the shed. My friend Maddie parked in front of the shed, and she told me to wait in the car, which immediately screamed the worst things to me, but I trusted her to read the situation and know what she was doing. After all, getting paid money to kick some random guy in the nuts, it sounded like a dream. The guy left his shed, looking even creepier than before. He was skin and bones with hair hanging past his shoulders. He also seemed nervous and twitchy, not at all like the guy in the Tinder profile. I heard her ask him, "Hey, I brought my friend along just as a precaution, is that okay?" And in that instant, I watched his expression drop, which screamed another red flag to me. He stuttered out, "Yeah, that's fine, I guess." So I got out of the car and followed her, knife in my pocket in a hurry, and we stepped inside the shed, to which point I immediately began to regret mine and her decisions up until that point. The shed was filthy. It was cluttered with random items and boxes, with the toilet sitting in the corner. The guy, who I quickly realized must be an addict by the way he was acting, very nervous and twitchy, was now standing solemnly in the corner, setting up his laptop to record this event. We made some very awkward small talk as he was doing this, at which point I noticed something else that bothered me. This random guy had Snapchat installed on his computer, which is what his friend Chelsea was messaging us from. I could just be paranoid, but something about this told me that he was actually Chelsea, and he needed another device to Snapchat her on to make it seem like he was someone else. After he set it up to record, he seemed angry and tense, as if he didn't actually think he was going to get kicked in the groin that day. He turned around and my friend went about her business with him, and promptly after he asked in a shallow voice, "So what are you guys doing tonight? Do you guys smoke?" referring to weed. We both quickly replied no, and that we had other things going on, despite the fact that we both do smoke. Maddie quickly collected the cash from him and we left. Now this might not all seem off to a regular person, but I can't help but feel like if I wasn't there, then something bad would have happened. After we left, my friend had mentioned that before we got there, this alleged Chelsea person had offered to rent a hotel room and buy her pizza. I don't like to think about what would have happened if I wasn't there, but deep down I know that something way more malicious had been planned. Based off the girl's recounting of this event, it's safe to assume that the man in the picture wasn't the same guy that they met in the shed, and that this Chelsea person didn't exist. Maddie and her friend were smart to go into the situation together, as there's always more safety in numbers. This last one is another example of why you can never be too careful with online dating. This was submitted by Jeremy, and this was his Tinder match. He matched with a girl named Mia, who was in the same high school class as him. Their conversation went as follows. "Hey, long time no see." "I know, hey. How have you been?" "Not bad, and you?" "I've been good, just working a crap ton." "You still talking to anyone from high school?" "No, not really. I was happy for high school to be over." "Same. It's funny we only ever really spoke a few times in school." "Yeah, I know. Maybe we should make up for lost time." "Maybe we should. Do you have a Snap?" From here, Jeremy gives Mia his Snap, and they continue their conversation there. Jeremy didn't take any screenshots from the Snap conversation, but basically from there, they continued to talk about life after high school. Then they escalated to talking about linking up somewhere and chatting in person. They agreed to meet in a nearby parking lot behind a strip mall where nobody goes at night. Jeremy was ready to go basically right away, not needing much time to get ready. Mia, on the other hand, said she wouldn't be able to get there for another hour and a half at least. She claimed she was with friends and couldn't just ditch them, so they set up a meetup time for 12 behind the strip mall. It took Jeremy only 5 minutes to get there, as the lot is in the same town that the two live. He sat there in his car waiting for her for about 20 minutes, receiving apologies for being late every few minutes on Snapchat. Eventually, headlights appeared from around the corner and approached slowly, then stopped not too far from Jeremy's car. Mia snapped him a picture of his car saying, "I think I see you." So Jeremy stepped out from his car. He then realized the car looked to be a small Honda or Hyundai, when in reality the car that was posted all over Mia's Instagram was a Jeep Cherokee. Immediately, Jeremy went back into his car and went to DM Mia on Instagram. Meanwhile, the car outside was honking at Jeremy. He opened Snap and messaged her, "Hey, step out from your car and let me see you for a second." They opened it, took half a minute to reply, then said, "I don't want to, it's so cold out, what's wrong?" At this point, Jeremy knew something was off, so he got in his car and started driving home, but the car was following him, honking the horn. Jeremy decided to get on the highway, at which point the car behind him tailed off and disappeared. Jeremy pulled to the side of the road to block the Snapchat account, but they had already beaten him to it. He went home, and by then he had gotten a DM back from the actual Mia. This is how their conversation went. Jeremy opened with this. "Hey, this may sound really weird, but did I match you on Tinder?" She says, "Hi, no, why?" "Jesus, long story. I matched someone catfishing as you, and we talked for a while about high school. I really thought it was you. I met up with the person running the account in a parking lot, but it was some random car, not your Jeep, so I drove away." Then he sent screenshots of the conversation. On August 7th, 2014, Warina Wright and Gable Tosti matched on Tinder. Gable wasn't her usual type, looking like a man who spends way too much time on his appearance, but he reminded her of Sam Winchester, a character in Supernatural, one of her favorite TV shows. Gable opened with a raunchy and aggressively forward message, saying, "You look delicious, I want to do dirty things to you." To which Warina responds, "Does that usually work?" Gable then sends, "Can you be a freak in the sheets?" To which she says, "Probably not, depends." Gable says, "What does it depend on?" And Warina responds, "What I've had to drink, lol. Gable keeps the conversation sexual by replying, "Let's get drunk together, I'm a porn star after a few drinks." Warina gives Gable her number after the two exchange a few more messages, and a week later, they meet for the first time in the Cavill Mall. They spent the night together heavily drinking, and CCTV footage from multiple establishments showed them meeting, walking into a nearby beer garden, then purchasing a 6-pack of beer at a nearby bottle shop, and after their night out together, they ended up returning to the Avalon Apartments where Gable lived alone on the 14th floor. 6 images taken by Gable that night show the couple apparently laughing and smiling in the apartment and on the balcony from which Warina would plunge to her death only hours later. For whatever reason, Gable recorded the audio of his entire night with Warina, which included the entire confrontation the two would have towards the end of the night, which was later played during Gable's trial. It was later found out that Gable had a weird habit of recording his entire dates with multiple women. At some point after the two had sex, Warina can be heard becoming increasingly erratic and aggressive towards him. However, as the night progresses, Gable can be heard in the recording refusing to let her leave, and Warina's terrified screams to let her go home are silenced when he locks her outside on the balcony. During this recording, Gable can allegedly be heard choking out Warina before locking her outside.
Call them with what? I thought you lost your phone.
Exactly.
So how are you going to call anyone without your phone?
You stole my fucking phone.
I didn't touch your goddamn phone.
You guys fucking stole my shit.
Shit, I should
So
never...
that's why I'm fucking calling them.
should have never given you so much to drink. I thought we were going to have fun.
Well, where's my shit?
Where's your
Where's
phone?
my shit?
What's your phone number? I'll
Going
have it.
100 fucking psycho bitch. Fucking.
I don't deserve this shit, alright? I'm a nice fucking guy.
Yeah. Nice fucking guy with all the money.
Must be on the balcony.
Well, I have shitloads of money. Why is my fucking money?
Stop Just calm down, please.
I'm not coming down.
You've had too much to drink, alright?
I'm
Just...
not coming down because I've had so much to drink and I have shitloads of money in New Zealand. It's not funny. Shit.
Just
you know?
Calm down, please.
Do you know how I... Yeah, because no one else has money.
Do you even remember what you were doing to me like half an hour ago? It was freaking me out. You beat me up for no reason.
Exactly.
Why?
Because you said you're a freak.
You thought it was funny or something. It's not.
No, I told you.
In the audio, he can be heard saying to Warina that she was lucky he didn't throw her off the balcony, along with numerous other threats.
Nice girl.
He's so good.
Fucking
it's
insane.
not about how you need. It's not about how...
Yeah, it is. You're fucking insane.
It's not about how you need. It's about how you... Give a shit now.
See, I thought you were kidding, and I've taken enough. This is fucking bullshit. You're lucky I haven't chucked you off my fucking balcony, you goddamn psycho little bitch. Who the fuck do you think I am? Yeah, do your Muay Thai now. What? What? Got something to say? Say it.
Yeah.
Say it. Who the fuck do you think you are?
No!
Hmm?
No! No! No!
You're trying to kill me, huh?
No!
Why'd you try to hit me with that?
No!
Huh?
No! 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 No!
Fucking mouth. It's all on recording, you know? It's all being recorded. I would, but you've been a bad girl.
It's apparent that both Gable and Warina were very drunk, with Warina sounding a lot drunker than Gable, slurring all of her words. Warina apparently thought the only way to escape would be attempting to climb down the building, which resulted in her falling from the balcony to her death. Gable, who was 28 at the time, was arrested for her death, but was ultimately acquitted of all charges. The prosecution claimed that Gable locked Warina on his balcony following a heated argument, and when she tried to escape, presumably to a lower floor, she plummeted to her death. Gable's defense team said Warina was extremely intoxicated and that she had been acting irrationally before her tragic fall. Prosecutors argued that Gable had choked Warina, trapped her, and made her so afraid that she felt she had no choice but to escape at whatever cost. An audio recording of Gable's phone call with his father right after the incident was eventually released, and in it, Gable is heard telling his father that things had become violent between the pair and that he locked her on his balcony, but insisted that he did not push her.
Hello, Dad. I might have a bit of a situation. I met up with a girl for a date tonight, and she started getting really aggressive. Like, it was alright at first, and like we, you know, had sex in bed, and then after that, like, she kept drinking, and we were both drinking, and she, like, I think she thought it was like a joke or something, but she kept, like, beating me up and whatever. Like, I've been walking around and there are like a million cops around my building. I don't know what to do. I didn't push her or anything. I'm like just walking around the area and there's like a million cops around the area. It's really up. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm walking around the area and I just see a million cops around Avalon. That this is really up. Why does this shit keep happening to me? Like, I swear to God, I didn't push her or anything. I just chucked her out on the balcony and shut the door because she was beating me up.
According to a downstairs neighbor, loud arguments with women could be heard quite often from Gable's apartment, hinting that this kind of thing was a regular occurrence with him. Many people do believe that Gable murdered Warina, and there was public outrage when Gable was acquitted.
The process of going through a divorce is usually not a pleasant one, and emotions are often very mixed. For some, a divorce can be a horrible time in one's life, full of grief and sorrow. But for others, it can be a hopeful time, a fresh start. For 39-year-old Jovi Pilipil, a nurse from Sydney, Australia, her recent divorce with ex-husband Alexander Villaluna was going to be a new beginning. Jovi posted on Facebook, "New Year, New Beginnings," accompanied by a smiling photo of herself. She had since posted on her Facebook of flowers sent by secret admirers and birthday cards and gifts from her 3 children, who called her the best mother there can be, and an independent mother and woman. In March 2016, Jovi was using Tinder to find a date. Jovi is the mother of 4. She grew up in the Philippines and then moved to Auckland, New Zealand to train to be a nurse, and then she and her family would eventually move to Sydney, Australia. While on Tinder, she matched 53-year-old businessman Keith Collins. Keith had 3 children and 4 stepchildren. The two enjoyed chatting and decided to meet for a date. On March 30th, 2016, they went to dinner at a Korean barbecue restaurant. Just as they were finishing up, a man came up and put his arm around Keith. It was Jovi's ex-husband, Alexander. He asked Keith what he was doing with his wife. Keith said they were just having dinner. Then suddenly Alexander grabbed Keith by the neck with his left arm, and he used his right hand to stab him in the abdomen with a hunting knife. Jovi started screaming at him to stop, saying they were just having dinner. After stabbing Keith several times, Alexander turned his attention to his 35-year-old estranged wife. He stabbed her once in the chest and once again in the arm when she tried to defend herself. Keith had fallen to the floor and he was trying to get up. Alexander got on top of him and then using both hands, he punched the knife into his chest. He did this 5 more times. After stabbing Keith 11 times and his ex-wife twice, Alexander calmly walked out of the restaurant. Jovi began to run from the restaurant, and at first Alexander went after her, but he seemed to give up or change his mind and head back to the restaurant, where he sat by Keith's now dead body and waited for the police to arrive. He surrendered without putting up a fight to the arresting officer, and he admitted that he attacked Keith because he was having dinner with his ex-wife.
You are more than welcome to thank you. Cheers, thank you.
Jovi was taken to the hospital, and while she sustained injuries, she survived the attack. Alexander and Jovi had met 9 years earlier when they were both training to be a nurse in Auckland. They were both from the Philippines. Jovi claimed that Alexander was abusive from the start of their relationship. He wouldn't let her have friends and wouldn't let her leave the house often. Jovi already had 3 children from a previous relationship in 2011. She had 1 son with Alexander. 2 years before Keith was murdered, Jovi left Alexander and got a restraining order against him. In response to this, he told her that he would kill her if she ever started dating another man. But he also said at a later time he would spare her life because of their son. In September of 2017, Alexander pleaded guilty to murder. When given the chance to apologize, Alexander said it was difficult to say he was sorry because he was still angry about what happened to him. It also turned out that he told the probation and parole service that Jovi blamed herself for the problems in their relationship. So according to him, she would have been happy to have been killed by him. Alexander also claimed he attacked Keith in self-defense. However, CCTV footage clearly showed that he was the aggressor. The judge said the most heinous part was when he attacked Keith while he was already on the floor bleeding to death. In October of 2017, Alexander was sentenced to 40 years in prison, and he'd have to serve at least 30 years before he could apply for parole. He'll be able to apply for parole on March 30th, 2046, when he's 74 years old. On the morning of October 26, 2018, 21-year-old Grace Mullane drove from her Essex County home to Heathrow Airport in London, where she boarded her flight to Peru. She spent the next 10 days traveling from island to island before heading on her way to Auckland, New Zealand, where she would arrive on November 30th, 2 days before her 22nd birthday. Grace was staying at a hostel where she made friends with some of the other tourists and backpackers. Grace was known for being an outgoing social butterfly. She spent the rest of the night on the 30th taking it relatively easy, and decided to start swiping on Tinder looking to meet someone, maybe make some local friends while she visited.
She swiped until she connected with somebody named Jesse, and the two began to chat. Grace and Jesse made plans to go on a date the following day, and so on December 1st, 2018, Grace's bunkmates watched as Grace got ready and left the hostel to head to her date with Jesse. A few hours went by, and at some point in the evening, Grace sent a message to a friend back home stating that the date was going really well and she felt a connection with Jesse. However, it wasn't long after this message that Grace's phone and social media activity went silent. The next day was her birthday, and many of Grace's family and friends went on to send Grace happy birthday wishes, but she never replied to any of them. And as the days went on, everybody became increasingly concerned. And so on December 5th, 2018, Grace's family reported her missing to Auckland law enforcement. They clarified their concern by pointing out that Grace was actually carrying 2 cell phones while she traveled just in case there was ever an issue with one of them, so that way she would still be able to stay in touch. Both of Grace's cell phones had been going directly to voicemail as of December 2nd. Grace's father traveled to New Zealand to do some searching of his own. CCTV footage caught Grace leaving her hostel at exactly 5:37 p.m. She then walked to a bar and casino known as Sky City, which was fairly close to her hostel, and she waited there for a few moments until she's seen meeting up with and hugging Jesse. The two of them then went into Sky City for approximately 90 minutes while they had some drinks together, and things appeared to be going really well and the two appeared to be hitting it off. They continued their date onto the next bar, known as Mexican Cafe. They had a few more drinks at the Mexican Cafe, and then they continued on again to another bar known as the Blue Stone Room. While at the Blue Stone Room, things appeared to become more intimate between the two. They can be seen kissing multiple times, before Jesse made a quick trip to the bathroom. This is the exact moment that Grace messaged her friend back home that she was having a really good time with her date. Jesse then returned, and the two eventually left the bar at 9:40 p.m. The two are seen holding hands and walking towards a building known as the City Life Hotel, where Jesse rented an apartment. The two can be seen entering the elevator of the building and exiting on the floor of Jesse's apartment. This is the last moment that Grace was seen alive. The next morning on December 2nd, Jesse is then seen entering the elevator alone and exiting his apartment building. He's then seen purchasing a handful of cleaning supplies as well as a new large suitcase. He places the new purchases inside his apartment, and then he leaves the apartment again. He then jumps in a taxi and gets a ride to a local car rental facility where he rents a vehicle and heads to another bar in the area to meet up with a second Tinder date the day after murdering his previous Tinder date. This date became uncomfortable very quickly, and she decided to end things because she found him really creepy after he had been talking about the best places to hide a dead body. When the date was over, Jesse stopped by the front desk of his apartment building and asked if he could borrow a Rug Doctor carpet steam cleaning machine. He brought it up to his apartment and spent a couple hours in there before appearing on camera again. He's then seen bringing a hotel luggage cart up to his room, and shortly after, reappearing in the elevator with the luggage cart loaded with his new suitcase and many other small suitcases. He then brings the luggage cart down to his rented vehicle and loads everything inside. The next morning at around 7 a.m. on December 3rd, Jesse then went to a nearby store and purchased a brand new shovel. He then returned to his apartment building just after 9 a.m. He then stopped by a random trash can and tossed out some items, and then drove to a dry cleaning service to clean some clothing, and then he took his car rental to be completely cleaned. Police caught up with Jesse a few days later and brought him in for questioning. The police believe that Jesse was involved in some way due to the substantial amount of evidence against him.
Tell us about Grace. So I was talking to Grace on Tinder. We'd matched on Friday. I saw that we'd matched the next day on the Saturday.
How did the evening pan out?
Yeah, pretty good. I didn't initially know that she was real.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of... So have you heard of catfish?
No.
So catfishing is where someone uses your profile, or uses your photos and pretends to be you and then meets, and you're a completely different person.
Right.
And it's happened to a few people I know in Australia. And it's all over the TV. So I thought, you know what, if I meet at Sky City, at least I know that there's lots of people around, so if it is someone that it's not, then I can just walk away.
How did the evening sort of come to an end?
There was a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and a thanks, no, nice meeting you. And then I said, let me know about tomorrow. And she said, okay, and then she kept walking.
We actually don't know if she's been murdered or not yet. She may be alive and well.
Okay.
But she might also be dead.
Okay.
Okay? And it could be that you've done it.
Hey, I just want to ask a question. Have I been arrested for something I didn't do?
You haven't been arrested, mate.
Oh.
No.
Holy.
They immediately obtained a search warrant for Jesse's apartment, and they began a forensic examination. Despite Jesse's cleaning attempts, the investigators were able to discover blood in and around the two edges of his apartment carpet using luminol. Jesse was then interviewed again on December 7th, just 2 days after his initial interview, and this was when his story to police began to change.
And drove the car out to Cumu at first. I picked up a shovel from ITM at Cumu. I ended up driving towards the Waitakaris. I went into the bush. I dug a hole. I went and got the suitcase. And I covered the hole. And then I drove.
Where is her possessions?
I threw them in the rubbish.
Whereabouts?
Albert Park rubbish.
Right. So what items of her property have been disposed of in Albert Park?
Everything.
All of her clothing?
Everything that was in the room.
Right.
I was just panicking.
Did you inflict any injuries on her that caused her to die?
No.
Did you kill Grace Mullane? Okay. And you're under arrest for the murder of Grace Mullane on or about the 2nd of December. You understand?
Yeah.
Jesse was charged and held in police custody, and while behind bars, police found pictures Jesse took of Grace before placing her inside the luggage that he purchased. Google search history and GPS from Jesse's cell phone led investigators to the Waitakere mountain ranges, where they discovered the luggage with Grace's body buried in a hole. Jesse was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. During this time, 2 more victims came forward and accused Jesse of sexually assaulting them after matching with him on Tinder. In October of 2020, Jesse was convicted of 8 more charges related to these offenses. He was sentenced to serve an additional 11 years concurrently to the life sentence that he had already received. Jesse Kempson currently resides at the Auckland prison in New Zealand, where he will remain.
Number 5. Last night, a friend rushed me out of the house to catch the opening act at a local bar's music night. After a few drinks, I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I checked the table we were sitting at the bar, the bathrooms, and after no luck, I used my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered, gave out a low, raspy giggle, and hung up. They didn't answer again. I eventually gave it up as a lost cause and headed home. I found my phone laying on my nightstand, right where I left it. Number 4. When I was a kid, I was always the last kid to get picked up by the bus driver to go to school. One day I was waiting for the bus by myself, and a bus with no kids pulled up. The bus driver smiled and told me to hop on. I just had a bad feeling. I said, "Where are the other kids?" He said, "We will go get them now. Just get on." He got more and more pushy but didn't do anything crazy. I just kept saying no and he shrugged and left. The real bus pulled up a few minutes later. I went to school and my parents didn't know until I mentioned it that night. Looking back, they were pretty worried. I remember them scrambling to make a few phone calls. Number 3. A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45 but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened the door and I got a quick peek. Her walls all had crosses painted on them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was damp, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit, and cockroaches everywhere. No dog, though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door. Then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night I had my girlfriend staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to the bed, looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy. But then the shadow starts talking. It's my neighbor and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night and who knows how long she stood there. "You should lock your doors at night," she says and walks out. The next morning I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor talking to herself in tongue. She has a plastic bag in her hand with her rotting dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside and I can smell death from that bag. At this point I'm scared shitless. She's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and knock on another person's door and ask them what the hell is going on. The guy is as scared as me. Apparently she broke into his apartment one evening as well while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack, only to find her behind the couch, staring at him holding a power drill. Come to think about it, now I know what was in her hand. At this stage, I'm basically shitting myself. I call the cops and they know all about her. Apparently she's a violent schizophrenic and she hasn't taken her meds, but they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days, waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in the van and drive off to some institution, and in less than a minute, it's like she was never there. I never see her again. Still have nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep. Number 2. I was about 15 minutes from finishing the night shift at work when there was a massive crash on one of the windows in the office, so I get up and go check it out. Someone has thrown quite a sizable rock through one of the windows on the front of the building. This is made especially weird because I'm working in the industrial district at 11:30 at night with none of the other businesses open. I go back to my desk, put a quick call through to security to let them know, and decide to head home. As I'm leaving the building, I'm freaking myself out about it more and more and end up running to my car, getting in and taking off. I'm almost home and I've started to calm down a bit when I realize that I didn't unlock my car when I got in. It had been unlocked the whole time. I do a quick check with my hand in the back seat for any possible murderers that might be hanging around there, but there's nothing there. Fast forward about 30 minutes. I've called a friend of mine who says he's out drinking, so I decide I'm going to join him. I jump on my bicycle and start riding over. I'm doodling along the road on my bike. It's a nice night and I'm in no big rush, just enjoying the moonlight when I hear someone riding behind me. I straighten up and stick to one side of the road. He passes me really slowly, and when he's right beside me, he shoots me a smile, and I can describe it as purely insane. I kind of flinch and am taken aback as he rides on. That's when I realize he's riding my mom's bike. Needless to say, I sprint the hell home. When I get there, sure enough, her bike is missing and one of my car's doors is open. The back left one. I was driving and had no need to open that door. Number 1. I worked at a campground on night shift. 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. every night. It wasn't bad. I would bring in my PS2 and game a good portion of the night, only having to deal with 1 or 2 people on busy nights. It was just me in this little 8-foot by 8-foot shack, with nothing around but dark all night. My first week there, the other third shift guy who was quitting told me about this payphone a few feet from the shack where I worked. He said it rang every night at 4:17 a.m., just once. It was probably just an automated test call, he guessed. He's never answered it himself. I go for a few months with the job. It was the middle of the summer, so most nights I had the windows closed, so I couldn't hear the payphone go off. Mid-August, I started leaving the windows open during the night. Sure enough, at 4:17 a.m. every morning, the phone would ring once. The ring even sounded creepy, like the payphone was submerged in water and then put where it sat. One night I got up the nerve to answer it. I set an alarm at 4:15 and would go wait at the phone until it rang. When it did, I answered it, but there was no sound, just dead air like someone was on the other line but wasn't answering. I said hello a few times and hung up. I did this every night for a week with the same results. I didn't think anything of it and left it alone after that for about a month. The first week of October, I decided to answer the phone once again. I set my alarm and when the time came, I answered the phone. I repeatedly said hello into the phone. Then I heard what sounded like someone inhaling through clenched teeth. The voice that sounded was rough and sounded like he had gargled gravel. He said my name, my complete name, first, middle, and last. It was a voice I've never heard. My voice caught in my throat and I hung up. I rattled some change into the payphone and hit star 69. The number had come from California. I lived in Indiana. There was this time long ago that I was in charge of watching my cousin and his 4 friends while they slept over. My uncle was paying me $100 to watch them for the night. All I did was play video games with a bunch of 10-year-olds for most of the night. I thought it would be the easiest $100 I ever made, but things took a huge turn for the worse when I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. We were in the basement still playing video games. 2 of the kids also heard the sounds. I counted 5 kids sitting on the couches, and neither my aunt or uncle were supposed to be home that night. I swallowed my gum when I realized the basement door was wide open. I told them to stay there while I ran upstairs to shut the door. The door didn't have a lock from the inside, only the outside. I called to the kids to hide in the workout room. I shut the TV and all the lights and then followed the kids into the workout room. We listened in the dark as the footsteps approached the basement door, and then the horrible sound of the basement door opening, followed by heavy steps stomping down each stair, one by one. One of my cousin's friends were crying. I had to tell them to shut the hell up. I leaned against the door, with a chair along with a bunch of barbell weights wedged against it. I listened as the door to the boiler room was opened, and a few moments later, closed. Screams of children filled the room as the doorknob to the workout room began to turn. I pushed the door with all my might to keep it shut. Whoever was on the other side quickly gave up as we heard rushed footsteps going up the stairs. I heard the footsteps right above our heads moving in the direction of the front door. This was before everybody had cell phones, so calling somebody first wasn't an option. I scanned the whole house, finding that the front door had been left open and all the bedrooms upstairs had been trashed. Nobody was in the house, so I called the kids up. A few things had been stolen, but as long as nobody was hurt, we were all happy. It was during a blizzard in Valley Stream. I was getting paid $250 to watch some couple's kid while they went away for the weekend. His name was Matthew. This took place on the first night, which was a Friday night. Matthew was already supposedly asleep, while I was in the living room watching a movie. I got a knock at the door, and looked at the clock. It was close to midnight. There was no way I was opening it. Not even 10 seconds later, I heard the sound of 2 or 3 men angrily banging on the door, telling me to open up. I felt like my heart was about to stop. I took a peek through the blinds, and there was somebody standing right on the other side of the window. I fell back in fear, and after managing to get back on my feet, I ran to the kitchen phone first thing to call the police. They said because of the weather, it could take a while for an officer to get here. I was told to take the child and hide somewhere until an officer arrived. They wanted to keep me on the line, but I wasn't thinking clearly in the heat of the moment and hung up. However, it wasn't until I ran through the living room that I realized the banging had stopped. I took a second peek through the living room window. Nobody was there now. I heard the sound of glass shattering from a few rooms over. My knees started to feel weak as I realized they had just broken the window and were about to climb into the house. I had to run and get Matthew. I couldn't just leave without him. Of course, when I got upstairs, there was no time left to run back downstairs, as I already heard footsteps and laughter coming from downstairs. I covered Matthew's mouth with my hand as I ran with him into his toy closet. A few minutes dragged on to what felt like half an hour as we sat there in the dark closet. Matthew began to squeal as footsteps on the carpet reached the outside of his bedroom door. There was more than one person. They came inside. There weren't many places to hide in this room. I was actually reflecting on my whole life, so sure I was gonna die. We heard the sound of a police siren outside, even from in the closet, and then I heard one of the men in the room mutter, "Aw, shit." I opened the door back up as I heard at least 3 pairs of footsteps hurriedly rushing down the stairs. They didn't get far, as the police later found their footprints in the backyard, leading to our shed. There were 5 men in total, and they were all arrested. I was 15 years old, still babysitting since I couldn't get a real job. This was by far the most horrifying experience of my life. Me and this kid I was babysitting, his name was Mike, were taking a walk with his dog through the woods in his backyard. His dog stopped, ears pointed up straight, and paw in the air. The dog started barking, pulling, and going crazy. He noticed something, and we were nervous that it was a black bear, so I told Mike to turn around and walk back to the house. I struggled to pull the dog in the other direction, and then I noticed what he was barking at. Beyond a big tree was some guy just standing there, staring up at me. I yelled out asking to him if he needed something, and with that, he turned around and walked off. I was genuinely freaked the fuck out. The dog calmed down at this point, so walking back was easier for a few minutes, until yet again, the dog started freaking out about something behind us. I couldn't see what it was, but I was worried it was the same guy as before, and that he might have been following me. I was tempted to unleash the dog on this guy, but that seemed like a bad idea. I didn't look back for the rest of the way back to the house, but the dog continued to bark and pull. I did the best I could to run, or at least walk fast. I made sure for a good half hour that we weren't followed to the house, checking every window and door routinely. I thought it was safe to eventually play Mario Kart with Mike and forget about what happened, but my worst fear came true, when right outside the window in the patio, I heard the sound of one of the toy buckets falling over. Turning on the patio light, I could see that a green bucket full of beach toys and balls had been knocked over. There was no way some small animal could do that. The dog was once again going crazy, barking at something. I told Mike to get me his dad's hunting rifle. Maybe that was dumb to have an 8-year-old get a gun for me, but I didn't have time to think rationally. There continued to be strange noises coming from all around the outside of the house. There was some taps on the windows, chimes being pushed, things falling over, but I eventually caught a glimpse of him through one of the windows. He was walking past until he noticed me and stopped. I lifted the gun up to show him that we were armed. He didn't run away right away though. He stood there crouched like some kind of creature, staring right into my soul. He finally walked back into the woods. I didn't sleep much that night, jumping at every small cracking noise. A week later, I got a call from Mike's parents. They told me a creepy-looking man had been stalking their house from the woods. They asked me to describe what the man that I saw looked like again. I couldn't give a good description, as I didn't see much of his face, but I assured them it was the same man. They practically begged me to babysit on a few occasions after this, but I always respectfully declined. That was a while ago, and I have no idea what's become of this family today, and what's become of the man stalking their house. I would frequently babysit back between the ages of 15 and 18. I lived close to a relatively wealthy area where people were more generous in terms of pay. There was never a shortage of need for babysitters either, so I made a decent amount of money. I've definitely had to take care of some stranger kids, but this one takes the prize. Right from the moment I met Michael, he seemed really quiet and weird. He was 12 years old too, which some might argue is more than old enough to be home alone, but maybe not overnight. They needed me to stay overnight. His parents told me he could be a bit strange sometimes and may need some extra attention. I didn't really need to do much though. In the room that I would be sleeping in was a huge toy closet, big enough to fit a big Lego play table with a bunch of Legos and other toys sitting on top of it. Michael was up there for most of his time building with Legos and other toys. I didn't really spy on him too much, I just let him do his own thing. But I heard him constantly talking in there, as if someone were with him, not play talking. I could only assume he had some kind of problems, and that's what his parents were hinting at. He came down eventually to eat some of the leftovers in the fridge, but then went right back up to his closet. It wasn't until I finally told him it was time to go to sleep that he left the closet. I just wanted to go to sleep myself. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to sounds coming from the closet, sounds of toys, like Legos. I called out to Michael to go to sleep. The sound stopped. The light wasn't on in the closet, so I was confused as to how the hell he could be playing in the dark. I went over to open the closet and turn the light on. Michael didn't seem to be in there. I dismissed the noises. I wasn't a paranoid person. I fell back asleep. I'd say an hour later, I woke up to partial brightness in the room. The closet light was on, but the door was shut. I called Michael's name again. I was pissed now. I saw the outlines of feet at the bottom of the closet door, and then heard a little giggle as if Michael were messing with me. I knew he was in there now. I marched over and threw open the door, and literally fell back in horror when nobody at all was in there. Where the two outlines of feet were, there was nothing now. I felt a pain in my chest from the fear. I ran to Michael's room to find him asleep in his bed. I locked his door and laid down on his floor. Just being next to another person made me feel a little safer. I fell asleep on the floor, and when the parents returned the next day, I decided to keep quiet about what I witnessed. I say what I witnessed because I know what happened. I got paid and left, and never had to worry about it again. Of course, it still sends chills up my spine thinking about it, and I still have no idea what to believe.
In 1986, in the quiet town of Pepperell, Massachusetts, the Bowen family moved into an old colonial house. Frank Bowen was raising his two daughters alone after the tragic loss of their mother. Tina was 16, and her younger sister Karen was just 9. They were a close-knit family trying to heal. Not long after moving in, strange things started happening around the house. It began with small stuff, tapping noises in the walls, lights turning on and off by themselves, and furniture appearing slightly out of place. The family dismissed it as the quirks of an old home. Then things escalated. One night, Tina and Karen attempted to use a Ouija board for fun. They laughed at first, but their faces dropped when the board began to respond. Moments later, they heard 3 distinct knocks coming from inside the wall. That's when the fear started to take root. More nights passed and more things went wrong. Objects went missing, The TV would turn on in the middle of the night. Frank began to feel watched, but nothing prepared them for what came next. Frank came home one evening to complete chaos. The house was freezing cold despite the heat being on. Radios blared static. The television was on with no signal. He climbed the stairs and found something horrifying. Standing in the hallway was a teenage boy he didn't recognize. He wore a wig and wedding dress. His face was smeared with makeup. In his hand, he held a hatchet. It was Daniel LaPlante. He had been living in the walls of the Bowen house. He'd broken in months earlier after becoming obsessed with Tina. He'd installed peepholes to spy on her and her family. He moved around the walls and crawl spaces like a rat, coming out only when no one was looking. The noises, the missing items, and the feelings of being watched, it was all him. Frank was able to escape with his daughters and alert the police. When officers searched the house, they found Daniel hiding in a narrow wall cavity, crouched and silent. There were tunnels carved out behind the walls, complete with blankets, food wrappers, and peepholes. LaPlante was arrested, but later released on bail. Not long after, he broke into another home and brutally murdered a pregnant woman and her 2 children. He was later convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The Bowen family never returned to that house. Ohio State in 2013. A group of college students rented a house off campus near Ohio State University. It was an old place, but cheap, and 10 people shared it. Like most college rentals, it had quirks: bad wiring, flickering lights, and strange noises. No one thought much of it at first, but one tenant, Brett, started noticing odd things. Cabinets were left open. The fridge seemed emptier than it should be. Lights were turned on that no one remembered using. The basement had a door that was always locked, labeled as a utility closet. The landlord said not to worry about it. Then one night, Brett went down to reset the breaker after a power surge. When he turned the corner, he saw a man walking out of the basement. The man was barefoot and calm, like he belonged there. Brett froze and asked, "Who are you?" The man said his name was Jeremy and walked away. Brett and his roommates broke into the locked door. What they found was shocking. Inside was a small, makeshift room. A mattress, personal photos, books, a guitar. Jeremy had been living in there, undetected, for weeks, maybe even longer. He ate their food, used their bathroom, and moved quietly to avoid being found. Turns out, Jeremy had a copy of the house key from a previous tenant and had never officially left. He just started living in the basement after everyone thought he was gone. The police were called, but Jeremy didn't resist. He packed up and left. No charges were filed, but the roommates were deeply shaken. After that, no one felt safe in the house again. Not long after Jeremy left, another group of students moved into that same house. They'd heard stories, but assumed it was just an urban legend. Soon enough, they started to experience the same things: missing food, footsteps at night, doors left open. Eventually, one of the roommates ventured into the basement to investigate, and what he found was disturbing. Someone else had moved in, again. Another man, older this time, had quietly taken up residence in the dark corners of the basement. His name was Jared. Like Jeremy, he'd gotten a copy of the key and slipped in without being noticed. He wasn't hostile. In fact, he apologized and offered to leave. But the idea that he had been there, sleeping beneath them, listening and watching, it left the house in a state of paranoia. The house was never the same. The students started locking every door, adding cameras, and avoiding the basement altogether. They later learned that there was a term for this: frogging, when someone secretly lives in another person's home without them knowing. But for them, it wasn't a story or concept. It was real, and it changed the rest of their living experience in the house. This story was sent to me by a girl named Ashley. She lives alone in a small one-bedroom house outside Spokane, Washington. She moved in last winter. The place is old but charming, quiet street and decent size. Her friends warned her about living alone in a house that backed up to thick woods, but she liked the privacy. At first, everything was fine. She settled in, decorated, and worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. Weeks went by without incident. until mid-February. It started small and unnoticeable, the kind of things you'd shrug off. A spoon in the sink when she swore she had cleaned it, her shampoo bottle moved slightly, lights flickering once or twice. She thought maybe she was just tired, maybe she was slipping. Then she started hearing things. At night, while watching TV in bed, she'd hear soft tapping in the walls. It wasn't mice. It was slow and rhythmic, almost like knuckles. At first, she assumed it was old pipes or maybe the wood settling, but the tapping would happen after midnight, sometimes right after she turned off the TV, like it was waiting. A few nights later, she heard something new, scraping, coming from the air vent near the ceiling in her bedroom. It only lasted a second, and then silence. She stood on a chair and shined her phone flashlight into the vents, but saw nothing, just darkness. She didn't think much of it until one day, about 3 weeks after the noises started, when she woke up and found her back door wide open. No signs of forced entry or anything missing. The door was just wide open, like someone had left in a hurry, or entered quietly. She called the police, and they looked around and said the lock may have malfunctioned. They advised her to get a new one. She replaced all the locks that day, but something still felt wrong. That night, as she was lying in bed, she heard the scraping again, then footsteps. Not in the livable space of her house, but above her, in the crawl space between the ceiling and the roof. It stopped as soon as she grabbed her phone. She didn't sleep that night, and the next morning, she climbed into the attic through the hallway panel. It was mostly insulation, dead bugs, and old boards. But in one far corner, she found something that didn't belong. A plastic water bottle, an empty granola wrapper, and the unmistakable shape of a rolled-up sleeping bag. Someone had been living up there. She bolted, called the police, and refused to go back in. This time, the officers did a full sweep, and they found him. The man was hiding inside the wall cavity behind her bedroom closet. He had built himself a narrow tunnel, accessed through a loose panel behind the furnace in the laundry room. There was a small camp light, bags of food, and a pile of clothes. They said it looked like he'd been there for weeks, at least a month. He had cut a small peephole through the drywall, covered by a vent grate. From there, he had a perfect view of her bed. He watched her sleep every night. They arrested him, but he had no ID and no explanation. Just some random drifter, likely homeless. But they think he had been watching her even before she moved in. There were scuff marks in the crawl space, like he'd been using it long before she noticed anything wrong. Ashley moved out that same week. The landlord tried to patch up the walls and make the place feel new again, but apparently no one wanted to rent it. The idea that someone could live just inches away from you in the walls, in the dark, is enough to make anyone's skin crawl. Ashley says according to the neighbors, a young couple moved into the house a few months later, and they quickly moved out within under a month. They never got an explanation why. As far as she knows, the house sits vacant today. The case of Theodore Coneys in Denver, Colorado, 1941. Philip Peters was a 73-year-old retired railroad auditor who lived alone while his wife recovered in the hospital. He was known to be polite and quiet, a man of strict routines and old-world values. His home was a small Victorian structure built decades earlier, with tight eaves and an attic space that most would consider uninhabitable. Peters had lived in that house for decades, and he knew its creaks, drafts, and shifting shadows. But what he didn't know was that someone else was learning those things too. Someone who had been living right above his head. Theodore Coneys, a local man in his early 60s, had once been acquainted with Peters. Desperately ill and homeless, Coneys decided to visit the home unannounced. Finding it empty, he let himself in. When he saw that the attic had a small crawl space barely large enough for a grown man to squeeze into, he made a decision that would define his life and also end another's. Coneys lived in the attic for weeks, maybe longer, without ever being seen. He crept down only when he was certain Peters was out, stealing small amounts of food, water, and newspapers. He left little evidence of his presence, except for odd creaks and faint footsteps Peters chalked up to the old bones of the house. But one night, everything changed. Peters came home early from a hospital visit and heard movement upstairs. Investigating, he climbed the staircase and was met by Conies, who was emerging from the attic hatch. Startled and desperate, Conies attacked Peter with an old iron stove shaker. He beat him to death and disappeared back into the attic. When police arrived, they were at a loss. There was no forced entry, no missing valuables. The doors were locked from the inside. They called it the Ghost House Murder. The case went cold for months. Meanwhile, Conies stayed in the attic, living feet above the place he'd turned into a crime scene. Eventually, neighbors saw signs of movement in the supposedly abandoned home. The police were called again. When they heard a noise above, they climbed into the attic. There, in a cramped blackened crawl space, they found Conies. He was filthy, emaciated, and seemed like he'd gone insane. He'd been living in the walls of that house for over 5 weeks after the murder, surviving off stored food and tap water, emerging only to pace and stare through the ventilation grates. He confessed on the spot. The press dubbed him the Denver Spider-Man, and he was sentenced to life in prison. The house was never occupied again. South Carolina, 2012. A woman living with her 5 children began to notice strange things around the house. She had just ended a long and rocky relationship with a man who had a history of erratic behavior, including multiple stints in jail, but she had moved on and tried to rebuild her life, focusing on her kids and her home. One night, as she lay in bed, she noticed something odd. Nails from the ceiling began to push downward. It looked as if someone were trying to remove them from above. She heard scratching and faint thumps, and what she thought was whispering. She dismissed it at first as stress or imagination, but then things escalated. Objects would move slightly from where they had been placed. Her food disappeared faster than it should. One morning, she woke to find insulation debris on her bed. Finally, she sent her nephew to investigate the attic. What he found shocked them all. Her ex-boyfriend was living up there. He had carved out a tiny makeshift living space beside the heating unit. He made a bed fashioned from coats and blankets, and he had been spying on her through a vent directly above her bed. There were plastic cups filled with urine and feces, indicating he hadn't left the attic for days. He admitted he had been up there for over 2 weeks. He came down, apologized, and calmly left before the police could arrest him. But the woman was traumatized, knowing that someone she once trusted had watched her and her children sleep mere feet above their heads. The woman stated she would be shaken for life. In February of 2020, a man in Oklahoma City started to notice some small things around his home were out of place, like a cereal box was half empty when it should have been full. The back door was unlocked one morning. The thermostat was changed in the night. His first thought was a memory lapse, then maybe an animal or even a prank by a neighbor. But the disturbances continued, always subtle but just enough to be unsettling. One day, he finally decided to investigate the attic. He expected to find a dead raccoon or maybe some birds. Instead, as he poked his head through the hatch, his flashlight landed on something horrifying. A mattress, a pile of clothing, and a man fast asleep. The intruder was in his 30s and looked unkempt and exhausted. The homeowner backed away and called the police, holding the man at gunpoint until they arrived. Investigators later learned the intruder had climbed an exterior staircase and entered through an unused rear attic door. He had lived in the home for nearly a week without being noticed. He survived on pantry food, snuck into the bathroom while the homeowner was out, and returned to his hiding spot like a ghost each time. He had no connection to the homeowner and offered no clear motive beyond desperation. He was arrested and charged with unlawful entry. The homeowner, though unharmed, said the experience forever changed how he viewed his own house. He couldn't sleep in peace, knowing how close someone had been to him, completely undetected. Lisa Leichhardt lives alone in a small 1950s house just outside Portland, Oregon. She bought the home earlier this year after a breakup, eager to start fresh. It wasn't perfect. It creaked in the wind and the pipes groaned sometimes, but it was quiet and cozy, and it was just enough space for her and her dog. At first, she loved the solitude, But about 2 months in, something started to feel off. It began at night when she was in bed. She would hear very soft sounds, like breathing. Very muffled and low breathing, like someone with a heavy chest cold exhaling slowly through their nose. And the thing was, it always seemed to come from the same spot, the wall directly beside her bed. She even moved her nightstand to see if maybe it was a vent or something. There was nothing, just an old blank wall with faded paint and a strange little square panel about a foot wide, bolted shut near the baseboard. It didn't seem important, maybe an old utility hatch, but the breathing kept happening, and then came the other sounds. Late at night, usually between 2 and 4 a.m., she would hear quiet tapping, like fingers tapping on wood. One night, she was lying still, staring at the ceiling, when she heard a whisper. She couldn't make out the words, but it came from inside the wall. That was the first time she left the house in the middle of the night to stay at a friend's place. She told her friend about the noises, and her friend joked that it sounded like her house was haunted, but Lisa didn't think it was a ghost. It sounded too real. She started sleeping on the couch, and even then, some nights she thought she'd heard something faint, like someone crawling through insulation. After about a week of avoiding her bedroom, she finally decided she had to confront it. She took a crowbar to the small square panel on the wall. It came off easier than expected. As it turned out, the screws weren't even holding it in place, so it could have been removed with her bare hands. Behind it was a dark cavity. She turned on her phone flashlight and aimed it into the space. At first, she saw insulation and old wood. Then she noticed that the space actually opened up further. It wasn't just a hollow wall. It was a crawl space, roughly 3 feet wide, stretching back into darkness. She leaned closer. That's when she saw a man sitting in the far corner of the space. His knees were to his chest, and he was filthy, pale, and his eyes wide and locked on hers. He didn't move or speak. All he did was stare back at her like he had been waiting for her. She screamed, dropped her phone, and ran. The man didn't come out, but when the police arrived, they searched the crawlspace area, and he was gone. Inside, they found evidence he'd been living there for weeks. A sleeping bag, plastic bottles filled with urine, food wrappers, and drawings, hundreds of them, scrawled onto the wood and insulation with pencil and charcoal. Most of them were of a woman, likely Lisa. The man had accessed the crawlspace through a forgotten storage hatch in the basement utility closet. It led up behind the walls of her bedroom, directly to the spot where the breathing had come from. He'd likely been watching her, listening to her sleep. The police never caught him. They said he might have been homeless, or maybe something worse. Someone who had picked her at random, someone who knew to stay hidden. Lisa moved out immediately. She's still in therapy, and she hasn't lived alone ever since this incident.